I thought I knew my mother. 28 years of shared breakfasts, whispered secrets, and Sunday afternoon phone calls that stretched into hours. 28 years of her chicken soup when I was sick, her advice when my heart was broken, her unwavering belief that I could do anything I set my mind to. Diana Morgan wasn't just my mother, she was my best friend. My anchor. The one person in the world I trusted without question. That trust was about to shatter like a mirror dropped from a great height. It started with a birthday gift. A simple, thoughtful gesture that I'd spent weeks planning something unique, something meaningful for her 55th birthday. I'd seen the advertisements everywhere. DNA ancestry kits, promising to unlock the secrets of your heritage, to connect you with distant relatives you never knew existed. My mother had always been curious about her roots. She'd grown up in foster care, never knowing her biological parents. And I thought this might finally give her some answers. I thought I was giving her a gift. I didn't realize I was lighting a fuse. The kit arrived on a Tuesday afternoon in late February. I remember standing in my apartment in Charlotte, turning the small box over in my hands. I imagined my mother's face when she opened it. Maybe she'd find cousins in Ireland, or learn that her ancestors had immigrated through Ellis Island. Maybe it would fill some of the emptiness she'd carried since childhood. This is going to be perfect, I told Sophie over FaceTime that evening. My best friend's face filled my phone screen, her dark hair pulled back in her signature messy bun. A DNA test? For your mom's birthday? She's always wanted to know where she came from. This could connect her with biological relatives she never knew she had, or it could open a can of worms. Sophie raised an eyebrow. What if she finds out her great-grandfather was a serial killer or something? That's not how DNA tests work, Soph. I'm just saying sometimes people have secrets for a reason. I laughed it off. Sophie had always been the cautious one, the friend who read the fine print and asked uncomfortable questions. But this was different. This was my mother, the most transparent person I knew. Diana Morgan didn't have secrets. She was an open book. A woman who cried during commercials and couldn't keep a surprise party secret for more than a week. Trust me, I said. This is going to make her so happy. Sophie shrugged. I hope you're right. The drive to my mother's house took 45 minutes through Charlotte's suburban sprawl. She lived in the same modest colonial she'd bought when I was 8. Back when she was still working double shifts at the hospital to make ends meet. The house had changed over the years, new paint, updated kitchen, a garden that had become her retirement project, but the essence remained the same. Safe, warm, home. I pulled into the driveway on the morning of March 15th. The birthday gift wrapped in lavender paper with a silver bow. The spring sun was just beginning to warm the air, and I could see daffodils pushing through the soil in my mother's flower beds. New beginnings, I thought. How fitting. Mom met me at the door with a hug that lasted longer than usual. My baby girl, she murmured into my hair. I'm so glad you came. I wouldn't miss your birthday for anything. She pulled back, her hands on my shoulders, studying my face the way she always did, as if checking to make sure I was eating enough, sleeping enough, living enough. Diana Morgan was 55 today, but she could have passed for 10 years younger. Her hair was still more brown than gray, her eyes still sharp, her smile still capable of making me feel like everything would be okay. You look tired, she said. Are you working too hard? I'm fine, Mom. This is your day, remember? A mother never stops worrying. She led me inside, where the house smelled like cinnamon and coffee. The dining table was set for two her good china, the crystal glasses we only used for special occasions. A small cake sat in the center, store-bought but decorated with fresh flowers from her garden. You didn't have to go to all this trouble, I said. It's my birthday. I'm allowed to go to trouble. She winked. Besides, I wanted everything to be nice for when you gave me whatever ridiculously thoughtful gift you've been hiding in that bag. I laughed, my hand tightening around the wrapped package. How do you always know? Because you're my daughter. I know everything about you. The words hit differently now. Looking back, I know everything about you. But the real question was, what did I know about her? We ate lunch first, her famous chicken salad, fresh bread from the bakery down the street, and a bottle of sparkling water because she'd given up wine for Lent. "Tell me about work," she said, refilling my glass. "Are they treating you well at the agency?" "Better than well. I might be up for a promotion. Senior designer? Creative director." Her face lit up. "Olivia! That's wonderful. Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "I didn't want to jinx it. The interview isn't until next month. You'll get it. You've worked so hard for this." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I'm so proud of you. I've always been proud of you." There was something in her voice, a weight I didn't recognize. I chalked it up to birthday emotions, the sentimentality that comes with milestone years. 55 wasn't old, but it wasn't young either. Maybe she was thinking about time passing, about all the years behind us, and the uncertain number ahead. "Okay," I said, pushing back from the table. "Present time. Finally." She clapped her hands like a child. "I've been staring at that package for an hour." I handed her the lavender-wrapped box, watching her face as she carefully removed the ribbon. My mother was one of those people who saved wrapping paper, who folded it neatly and stored it in a drawer for future use. I used to tease her about it. Now I understand, when you grow up with nothing, you learn to treasure everything. She lifted the lid of the box. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, was the DNA kit. "Ancestry Discovery Kit." She read aloud. "Unlock your heritage." I leaned forward, eager to explain. "I know you've always wondered about your biological family. This test can connect you with relatives you never knew you had, distant cousins, maybe even siblings, and it shows your ethnic breakdown, where your ancestors came from." I thought maybe it could give you some answers. My mother didn't respond. She was staring at the box, her face completely still. The color had drained from her cheeks, and her hands, always so steady, the hands of a nurse who'd held life and death in equal measure, were trembling. She looked up, and for a split second, I saw something in her eyes I'd never seen before. Fear. Raw, primal, unmistakable fear. Then it was gone, replaced by a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. This is so thoughtful, sweetheart." She set the box down gently, as if it were made of glass. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything. Just spit in a tube and send it off. Results come back in about 6 weeks. 6 weeks. She repeated the words like they were a death sentence. "Mom, are you okay?" "I'm fine." She stood abruptly, gathering our plates. "I'm just overwhelmed. It's a lot to process. Let me get the cake." She disappeared into the kitchen, and I sat alone at the table, staring at the DNA kit. Something was wrong. I'd imagined this moment 100 times: her surprise, her excitement, maybe even happy tears at the possibility of finally knowing where she came from. I hadn't imagined this. I hadn't imagined her hands shaking, or her face going pale, or her rushing to escape to another room. From the kitchen, I heard water running. Then, so faintly I almost missed it, the sound of my mother crying. I didn't go to her. I should have, but something held me back, a whisper of intuition, a feeling that whatever was happening was bigger than birthday emotions or fear of needles or any of the rational explanations I was constructing in my mind. When she returned with the cake, her eyes were dry and her smile was firmly in place. "Make a wish, Mom," I said as I lit the candles. She closed her eyes for a long moment. When she opened them, she looked at me with an expression I couldn't read. "I wish," she started, then stopped. "I wish things could stay exactly as they are." She blew out the candles, but wishes don't always come true. And some things, once set in motion, cannot be stopped. The rest of the birthday passed in a haze of forced normalcy. We ate cake. We looked through old photo albums. We watched her favorite movie, a romantic comedy from the 90s that she'd seen 100 times but still laughed at like it was new. Through it all, my mother smiled and chatted and pretended that nothing had happened in those moments after she opened my gift. but I couldn't unsee what I'd seen. The trembling hands, the pale face, the tears I'd heard through the kitchen door. These weren't the reactions of a woman excited about discovering her heritage. These were the reactions of a woman who'd just watched a bomb land in her living room and was waiting for it to explode. "You're quiet," she said, as I was getting ready to leave. "Is everything okay?" The irony wasn't lost on me. She was asking if times was okay, when she was the one who'd been crying an hour ago. "Just tired," I lied. "Long week at work. You work too hard." She pulled me into a hug at the door, holding on longer than usual. "Promise me you'll take care of yourself." "I promise." "And Olivia?" She pulled back, her hands on my shoulders, her eyes searching my face. "You know I love you, right? More than anything in this world. No matter what happens, that will never change." The words should have been comforting. Instead, they felt like a warning. "I know, Mom. I love you too." I drove home with her words echoing in my head. Asterisk. No matter what happens. Asterisk. What did she think was going to happen? What was she preparing me for? 6 weeks passed. I threw myself into work, trying to ignore the growing unease that had settled in my chest since the birthday party. The DNA kit sat on my mother's kitchen counter. I'd seen it during my weekly visits, still in its box, untouched. I didn't ask about it. She didn't mention it. We circled around it like it was a sleeping predator, neither of us willing to be the one who woke it up. Sophie noticed the change in me. "You've been weird lately," she said over drinks one Friday evening. We were at our usual spot, a wine bar in No-Da with exposed brick walls and overpriced charcuterie boards. Like, distant weird. "Is it the promotion thing?" "I got the promotion." "What?" "Olivia!" She grabbed my arm, nearly spilling her wine. "That's amazing. Why aren't we celebrating?" "I don't know. I guess I've had other things on my mind." "Like what?" I hesitated. I hadn't told anyone about the birthday incident, not even Sophie. Part of me felt ridiculous even thinking about it. So my mom had a weird reaction to a gift. So she'd cried in the kitchen. People cried on their birthdays all the time. It didn't mean anything. But another part of me, the part that had grown up watching my mother's face for every micro-expression, learning to read her moods before she spoke them, that part knew better. "It's probably nothing," I said finally. "Just, my mom's been acting strange since her birthday. Ever since I gave her that DNA kit." Sophie's eyebrow arched. "Did she take the test?" "I don't think so. It's still sitting on her counter, unopened. Maybe she's just not interested. Some people don't care about that stuff." She was interested. She's talked about wanting to know her biological family for as long as I can remember. That's why I bought it. I swirled my wine, watching the light play through the red liquid. But when she opened it, Sophie, it was like she'd seen a ghost. She went completely pale. Her hands were shaking. "Did you ask her about it?" "I tried. She just said she was overwhelmed. But I heard her crying in the kitchen afterward. She didn't know I could hear. She neither won. Sophie was quiet for a moment. "That times weird, right? And ever since then, she keeps saying these things. I love you no matter what. Nothing will ever change how I feel about you. Like she's, I don't know, preparing me for something. Have you considered that maybe she's sick? Like, maybe she got bad news from a doctor and she's trying to figure out how to tell you?" The thought hit me like a punch to the gut. I hadn't considered that. My mother, who had spent her career caring for others, who had always been the picture of health. What if something was wrong? "Oh God," I whispered. "What if she's dying?" I didn't say that, but it makes sense. The weird behavior, the emotional reactions, the "I love you no matter what" speeches. What if she found out she has cancer or something and she's trying to prepare me? Sophie reached across the table and grabbed my hand. "Olivia, breathe. You're spiraling. You don't know anything yet. Maybe you should just ask her directly. Tell her you're worried." What if she doesn't want to talk about it? Then at least she'll know you've noticed something's wrong. I nodded slowly. Sophie was right. I couldn't keep dancing around this, watching my mother from a distance and constructing worst-case scenarios in my head. I needed to talk to her. I needed to know the truth. Whatever that truth was, the email arrived on a Tuesday. I was at work, buried in a project for a new client, when my phone buzzed with a notification. I glanced at it absently, expecting another promotional email or calendar reminder. Instead, I saw asterisk, asterisk, your ancestry discovery results are ready. Asterisk, asterisk. I stared at the screen, confused. I hadn't taken a DNA test. The only kit I'd bought was for my mother, and as far as I knew, it was still sitting unopened on her kitchen counter. But when I opened the email and logged into the account, I realized my mistake. I'd set up the account using my own email address when I purchased the kit, intending to transfer it to my mother later. She must have finally taken the test without telling me, and the results had been sent to my inbox instead of hers. For a long moment, I just stared at the screen. I should call her. I should let her know the results were in, and let her be the first to see them. This was her information, her heritage, her story to discover. But my finger was already hovering over the View Results button. Asterisk. Just a peek asterisk, I told myself. Asterisk. I'll just make sure everything looks okay. And then I'll call her. Asterisk. I clicked the button. The page loaded slowly, my office's Wi-Fi struggling with the high-resolution graphics. First came the ethnicity breakdown, a colorful pie chart showing percentages from different regions. I scanned it quickly. 45% British and Irish, 30% German and French, 15% Scandinavian, 10% broadly Northwestern European. Nothing surprising, nothing that would explain my mother's strange reaction. Then I scrolled down to the DNA relatives section, and my world stopped spinning. At the top of the list, in bold letters, was a match labeled Parent, Child, Relationship, 50% DNA shared. The name attached to the match was *** Olivia Morgan *** me. I was listed as a DNA match. A times, parent-child times, match. But that was impossible. This was my mother's test. If I was showing up as a match, it should say mother, daughter on her end. Unless, my brain struggled to process what I was seeing. The test was supposed to be my mother's. The results were supposed to be hers. But if I was showing up as a 50% match with the label parent, child, ***, she took the test. ***. I realized, slowly. ***. But the results are showing my matches, not hers. ***, which meant the kit had somehow been registered to me instead of her, which meant these weren't my mother's ancestry results. They were mine. And according to the DNA database, Diana Morgan, the woman who had raised me, loved me, sacrificed everything for me, did not show up anywhere in my genetic relatives. Not as a mother, not as a distant cousin, not at all. I scrolled frantically through the list of matches. Names I didn't recognize. People with 2% or 4% shared DNA, labeled as fourth cousins or fifth to eighth cousins. Strangers, all of them, and nowhere, absolutely nowhere, was Diana Morgan, the woman I called mother, the woman who had been there for every birthday, every graduation, every heartbreak and triumph of my 28 years. She wasn't in my DNA. The phone slipped from my trembling hands and clattered onto my desk. ***. This can't be right, ***, I thought. ***. There's been a mistake. A mix-up at the lab. Something. ***. But even as I thought it, I remembered her face when she'd opened the gift. The trembling hands. The tears in the kitchen. The desperate way she'd said, "I love you no matter what." She'd known. She'd known this would happen. She'd known because the thought was too enormous to complete. Too impossible. Too devastating. and yet the evidence was right there, glowing on my screen, undeniable and absolute. Diana Morgan was not my biological mother, and she had known it all along. I don't remember leaving the office. One moment I was staring at my computer screen, watching my entire identity crumble into pixels and percentages. The next I was sitting in my car in the parking garage, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles had turned white. The DNA results were still open on my phone. I'd taken screenshots, 3 of them, as if the evidence might disappear if I didn't capture it, as if this nightmare might evaporate like morning fog, and I'd wake up to find everything was normal again. But the screenshots were still there. The truth was still there. Diana Morgan was not my mother. I called Sophie. She answered on the second ring. "Hey, I was just thinking about, she's not my mom." Silence. Then, "What?" The DNA results came back. Diana's not my biological mother. There's no match. 0%. She's not. She's not. I couldn't finish the sentence. My voice cracked and dissolved into something between a sob and a laugh. The kind of sound you make when reality becomes so absurd that your brain doesn't know how to process it. "Olivia, slow down. What are you talking about?" "The test. The birthday gift. She must have taken it without telling me, and the results came to my email, and I looked, and Sophie." I gasped for air. "She's not in my DNA. At all. The woman who raised me, who I've called Mom for 28 years, she's a stranger. A complete, genetic stranger. Oh my God. What do I do? What am I supposed to do with this?" Sophie's voice was steady, the calm in my storm. "Where are you right now?" "My car. Office parking garage." "Okay. Don't drive anywhere. You're in no condition to drive. I'm coming to get you. And the way. And the Defferton Sunses. I have to talk to her. Not tonight. Not like this." Sophie's tone left no room for argument. "You're in shock, Liv. You need to process this before you confront her. If you go over there right now, you'll say things you can't take back." "Maybe I want to say things I can't take back." "No. You don't. Trust me." I closed my eyes, pressing my forehead against the steering wheel. Sophie was right. I knew she was right, but every cell in my body was screaming at me to drive to my mother's house, to Diana's house, and demand answers. Who was I? Whose daughter was I really? And why had the woman I loved most in the world lied to me for my entire life? Sophie arrived 20 minutes later. She drove me to her apartment, made me tea. I didn't drink, and sat with me on her couch while I stared at the wall and tried to remember how to breathe. "There has to be an explanation," she said gently. "Maybe you were adopted. Lots of people are adopted. It doesn't mean she loves you any less. Then why didn't she tell me?" "I don't know." Fear? Shame? Maybe she was waiting for the right time. 28 years, Sophie. 28 years of right times. Every birthday. Every Mother's Day. Every single time I said, "I love you, Mom." And she said it back without mentioning that, "Oh, by the way, I'm not actually your mother." People make complicated choices. This isn't complicated. This is lying. This is building an entire relationship on a foundation of lies. I pulled up the screenshots on my phone again, scrolling through the list of genetic matches. Look at this. I have relatives, real biological relatives, people who share my actual DNA, and I don't know any of them. I don't know their names, or their faces, or their stories, because she kept me from them. Sophie leaned over to look at the screen. "Have you looked at any of these matches?" "Not really." I was too focused on what wasn't there. "Maybe you should. Maybe there's a clue about who your biological family is." I hadn't thought of that. I'd been so consumed by the absence of Diana that I hadn't considered the presence of others, the strangers in my genetic code, who might hold the answers to questions I'd never thought to ask. I opened the DNA relatives section again, this time paying attention to the names and percentages. Most of the matches were distant fourth cousins, fifth to eighth cousins, people who shared only tiny fragments of my genetic material. A woman named Patricia Holloway, who shared 6.25% of my DNA, labeled as a first cousin, once removed, or half-great aunt. A man named Robert Bennett, who shared 12.5%, labeled as a first cousin or half-uncle. Bennett. Holloway. Names I'd never heard. Names that apparently belonged to my real family, and then I saw it. Near the bottom of the first page, a match I'd scrolled past in my initial panic. A woman named Eleanor Bennett, sharing 25% of my DNA. The relationship label read, Grandmother. I had a grandmother. A living, breathing grandmother who I had never met, never known existed. Oh my God, I whispered. What? What is it? I have a grandmother. Eleanor Bennett. She's right here. In the database. 25% DNA match. Sophie's eyes widened. That's your mom's mom. Your biological mom's mom. Which means my biological mother was a Bennett, not a Morgan, not a Holloway. I stared at the name, my heart pounding. Who the hell is Eleanor Bennett? And who was her daughter? The questions spiraled outward like ripples in a pond, each one leading to another, each one more terrifying than the last. If I had a grandmother, did I have a mother? A biological mother who was still alive somewhere, wondering what happened to her daughter? Or was there a darker explanation? Asterisk. You're a 50% DNA match. Asterisk, the results had said. Asterisk. Parent. Child. Relationship. Asterisk. But the only parent listed in my matches was Eleanor Bennett, and she was a grandparent, not a parent. Which meant my biological mother wasn't in the database. Which meant she either hadn't taken a DNA test, or she couldn't, because she was dead. I didn't sleep that night. I lay on Sophie's couch, staring at the ceiling, running through every possible scenario. Adoption. Surrogacy. Some kind of mix-up at the hospital. Maybe Diana had been given the wrong baby by mistake. Maybe she didn't even know. But that didn't explain her reaction to the DNA kit. The trembling hands, the tears, the I love you no matter what. She knew. Whatever the truth was, Diana knew. And she had chosen to keep it from me. At 3 a.m., I finally gave up on sleep and opened my laptop. I typed Eleanor Bennett into the search bar, along with Charlotte and North Carolina. No results. I tried Eleanor Bennett and Bennett family. Still nothing useful, just social media profiles of strangers and obituaries of people who died decades ago. Then, on impulse, I added a new search term. Catherine Bennett, and missing, and daughter. The results loaded. And there, on the first page, was a newspaper article from the Boston Globe. The headline read, Asterisk, asterisk, single mother found dead in Roxbury apartment. 3. Year-old daughter. Missing. Asterisk, asterisk. My blood turned to ice. I clicked the link. My hands trembling so badly, I could barely control the mouse. The article was brief, written in the detached language of crime reporting. Asterisk Catherine Bennett, 27, was found dead in her Roxbury apartment on Saturday evening by a concerned neighbor. Police say Bennett appeared to have been the victim of a homicide, though details have not been released pending investigation. Bennett's 3-year-old daughter, Emma, was not found at the scene and is currently listed as missing. Anyone with information is urged to contact Boston police. Asterisk. The article included a photograph, a woman with dark hair and light eyes, smiling at the camera with a toddler on her hip. The toddler had my face. I knew it with a certainty that bypassed logic and went straight to my bones. That little girl, Emma Bennett, age 3, missing since November 2000, was me. My name wasn't Olivia Morgan. My mother wasn't Diana Morgan. My real mother was Catherine Bennett, and she had been murdered 25 years ago. I was on Diana's doorstep by 7 a.m. Sophie had tried to stop me. She'd argued, pleaded, even threatened to hide my car keys. But there was no force on earth that could have kept me from that house, not after what I'd discovered. Not after learning that my entire existence was built on the grave of a murdered woman. The morning was gray and cold, the kind of early spring day that couldn't decide if it wanted to be winter or not. I stood on the porch where I'd stood 1,000 times before, looking at the door I'd walked through since childhood, and felt like a stranger approaching a stranger's home. I didn't knock. I used my key. Diana was in the kitchen, her back to me, pouring coffee into her favorite mug, the one I'd painted for her in elementary school, the one with the crooked heart and the words, "Best Mom Ever," in wobbly letters. Best mom ever. The irony was suffocating. Olivia? She turned, surprised. Sweetheart, what are you doing here so early? Is everything? She stopped. She saw my face, and in that moment, watching the color drain from her cheeks, watching her grip tighten on that ridiculous mug, I knew that everything I'd discovered was true. I knew that she'd been waiting for this moment for 25 years. You know why I'm here, I said. It wasn't a question. Diana set down the mug with trembling hands. Olivia, let me explain. Explain what? My voice came out harder than I intended, sharp enough to cut. Explain how you're not my mother? Explain how my real mother was murdered in 2000 and I was listed as a missing child? Explain how you've been lying to me for my entire life? Please, sit down. I don't want to sit down. The words exploded out of me. 28 years of trust shattering into shrapnel. I want the truth. For once in my life, I want you to tell me the goddamn truth. Diana flinched. In all my years, I'd never raised my voice to her, never cursed at her, never looked at her with anything but love and respect. But the woman I'd loved and respected was a fiction. A character she'd created. A mask she'd worn while hiding a murdered woman's child. How did you find out? She asked quietly. The DNA test. The one you were so afraid of. The results came to my email. I pulled out my phone, showing her the screenshots. See? No match. 0% shared DNA. You're not my mother. You never were. Diana stared at the screen, her face crumpling, and then I searched. I found the article about Catherine Bennett, about her murder, about her 3-year-old daughter Emma, who disappeared the same night. I stepped closer, my voice dropping to something barely above a whisper. That's me, isn't it? I'm Emma. I'm the missing girl. Diana closed her eyes. A tear slid down her cheek. One word, one syllable, and with it, the last foundation of my identity crumbled to dust. Tell me everything. We were sitting at the kitchen table now, the same table where we'd shared countless meals, where she'd helped me with homework, where we'd laughed and cried and built what I thought was a real family. The coffee sat untouched between us, growing cold. Diana's hands were folded in front of her. Her knuckles, white. She looked older than I'd ever seen her, not 55 but ancient, weighted down by secrets that had been crushing her for a quarter century. I don't know where to start, she said. Start with how you got me. Start with why a 3-year-old girl whose mother was just murdered ended up with you, instead of with the police, with child services, with her actual family. Diana took a shaky breath. I was married then, to a man named Marcus Webb. I don't remember any Marcus. You wouldn't. We divorced when you were 5. I made sure you'd never remember him. Her voice hardened. I made sure you'd never have to. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she stood and walked to the window, looking out at the garden she'd tended so carefully all these years. Marcus was a police officer, Boston PD. He was a good cop, or I thought he was. I thought I knew him. She laughed bitterly. I suppose we all think we know the people we love. What does this have to do with Catherine Bennett? Diana turned to face me. Marcus was having an affair. With her. With Catherine. The words hung in the air, each one adding a new piece to the horrifying puzzle. I didn't know at first. I found out later, much later. But Marcus, he knew Catherine. He knew her well. And he knew about you, About Emma. He used to talk about her. This waitress he'd met while working a case. How she was struggling as a single mother. How she needed help. And then she was murdered. And I disappeared. And somehow, miraculously, I ended up with you. With the wife of the man who was having an affair with my mother. I stood abruptly, my chair scraping against the floor. How stupid do you think I am? How obvious does this have to be? Olivia, he killed her, didn't he? Your husband. He killed my mother and he took me and he brought me to you like some kind of trophy, some kind of souvenir. Diana's face went white. It's not that simple. Then make it simple. Tell me the truth. Did Marcus Webb kill Catherine Bennett? The silence stretched between us. Vast and terrible. And then, so quietly, I almost didn't hear it. Yes, I think I screamed. I'm not sure. The next few minutes exist in my memory only as fragments shattered, pieces of a moment too painful to fully record. I remember Diana reaching for me. I remember pulling away. I remember the coffee mug falling from the table and shattering on the floor, the words "best mom ever" splitting into jagged pieces. You knew, I heard myself saying. You knew he killed her. And you kept me anyway. You raised me in a house with a murderer. You let me call you mom while my real mother rotted in a grave and her killer tucked me into bed at night. It wasn't like that. I didn't know at first. I swear to you, I didn't know. When? When? Did you find out? A year later. Maybe more. I found things. Evidence. And when I confronted him, he didn't deny it. He said, her voice broke. He said Catherine was going to ruin his career. That she was threatening to tell everyone about the affair. That he didn't have a choice. So he murdered her. And kidnapped her daughter. And you just went along with it? I was terrified. He said, if I ever told anyone, he'd kill me too. He said he'd kill you. He said Diana was sobbing now. Ugly, gasping sobs that shook her entire body. I was trapped. I didn't know what to do. I thought if I could just get you away from him. If I could just keep you safe. You could have gone to the police. He was the police. His friends were the police. Who was I supposed to tell? Anyone. Everyone. You could have taken me to my real family, to my grandmother, who's been alive this whole time thinking I was dead. Diana crumpled. She sank to the floor among the broken pieces of the coffee mug, among the shattered fragments of best mom ever, and she wept like a woman who had finally reached the end of a very long road. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry. I thought I was protecting you. I thought if I loved you enough, it would make up for everything. I thought. You thought wrong. I walked to the door. Olivia, please, don't leave like this. Let me explain. You've had 25 years to explain. You chose silence instead. I turned back, one hand on the doorknob. My name isn't Olivia. It's Emma. Emma Bennett. And my mother, my real mother, deserves justice, even if you're too much of a coward to help me get it. I walked out. Behind me, I heard Diana calling my name, both of my names, the real and the fake, as if she couldn't decide which daughter she was losing. I didn't look back. I drove for hours without knowing where I was going. The highways blurred together Charlotte to nowhere. Nowhere to anywhere but here. My phone buzzed constantly. Diana calling. Sophie calling. Diana again. I turned it off and let the silence swallow me. My mother was murdered. The woman who raised me knew about it. The man who killed her had tucked me into bed, read me stories, called me his daughter. These facts circled in my brain like vultures, each one taking another piece of whatever was left of my sanity. At some point, I found myself parked outside a storage facility on the outskirts of the city. I didn't remember driving there. I didn't remember deciding to come. But my hands were shaking as I pulled out the key, the small brass key I'd found taped to the back of a photograph in Diana's basement 3 years ago. I'd asked her about it once. She'd said it was nothing. An old key to an old lock she couldn't even remember. I'd believed her, because I'd had no reason not to. I had reasons now. The storage unit was small, maybe 10 by 10 feet, and crammed with boxes I'd never seen before. Not the normal detritus of a life. Holiday decorations, old furniture, boxes of tax returns. These were different. These were hidden, deliberately hidden, in a facility 20 miles from Diana's house, under a name I didn't recognize. Diana Holloway, her maiden name. The name she'd used before she married Marcus Webb. I pulled the cord on the single bare bulb, flooding the space with harsh yellow light. The boxes were labeled in Diana's neat handwriting. 1,998. 1,999. 2,000. 2001. Each year of my stolen childhood, preserved in cardboard and packing tape. I started with 2000. Inside, I found newspaper clippings. Dozens of them, carefully cut and preserved in plastic sleeves. All of them about the same story. Asterisk. Asterisk. Roxbury. Woman found dead. Daughter still missing. Asterisk. Asterisk. Asterisk asterisk. Police search for 3. Year. Old Emma Bennett. Asterisk asterisk. 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 Community. Holds. Vigil. For missing. Toddler. Asterisk. 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 1 week later. No leads. In Bennett. Murder case. Asterisk. Asterisk. Diana had collected every article, every update. I felt sick. Deeper in the box, I found photographs. Not newspaper photos, real photographs. The kind you develop at a drugstore. Catherine Bennett smiling at the camera. Young and beautiful and alive. Catherine holding a baby holding me in a hospital bed. Exhausted but radiant. Catherine and a toddler at a playground. At a birthday party. In front of a Christmas tree. My mother. My real mother. I'd never seen her face except in that one grainy newspaper photo. But here she was, preserved in Diana's secret collection. Dozens of images of the woman whose life had been stolen, whose daughter had been stolen. Why did Diana have these? The answer came in the next item I pulled from the box. A spiral notebook, its cover worn and faded. I opened it to the first page and found Diana's handwriting. November 15th to 1000. Asterisk. Marcus came home tonight with the child. He said her mother was dead. He said nobody would be looking for her. He said we could keep her, raise her as our own, and nobody would ever know. Asterisk. Asterisk, I should have called the police. I know I should have. But she was so small, so scared. She kept asking for her mommy, and I didn't know what to say. Marcus told me to give her something to help her sleep. I refused. He got angry. Asterisk. Asterisk. What have I done? What am I doing? Asterisk. Asterisk. God help me. God help us all. Asterisk. I read the entire notebook. It took hours, sitting on the cold concrete floor of that storage unit, turning page after page of Diana's private confession. The entries spanned years, sporadic at first, then more frequent as her guilt grew heavier. Asterisk. The 1st of December, 2000. The news says they're still looking for Emma. They've interviewed the neighbors, the daycare workers, everyone. But Marcus says not to worry. He says he covered his tracks. I don't know what that means, and I'm afraid to ask. Asterisk. Asterisk, the 14th of February, 2001. She called me mommy today. For the first time, I wanted to cry. I wanted to tell her the truth, but Marcus was watching, and his eyes warned me to stay silent. Asterisk. Asterisk, the 3rd of June, 2001. I found blood on Marcus's jacket last week. Old blood, dried into the fabric. I asked him about it, and he hit me. First time he's ever hit me. He said if I ever mention that night again, I'll end up like the waitress. I believe him. Asterisk. Asterisk the 22nd of September 2001. I've started planning. I need to get Olivia Emma away from him. I need to disappear. I've been saving money. A little at a time. Hiding it where he won't find it. I don't know where we'll go, but anywhere is better than here. Asterisk. Asterisk. The 15th of March 2002. We're out. We're free. I filed for divorce and took Olivia to Charlotte before Marcus could stop us. He's threatened to find us, to take her back, to finish what he started. But I have evidence now, photographs, documents, things I've collected over the past year. I told him if anything happens to us, it all goes to the FBI. Asterisk. Asterisk. He backed off. For now. Asterisk. Asterisk. I don't know if I've saved her or damned her. I've taken another woman's child and raised her as my own. I've lied to her every single day. But at least she's alive. At least she's safe. Asterisk. That has to count for something. Asterisk. Asterisk, doesn't it? Asterisk. The last entry was dated just 3 weeks ago. Asterisk. The 25th of February 2025. Olivia gave me a DNA test for my birthday. She doesn't know what she's done. She doesn't know what this will reveal. I should tell her the truth. I've wanted to tell her for 25 years, but I'm terrified. What if she hates me? What if she goes to the police? What if Marcus finds out? Asterisk. Asterisk. He's still out there. Still alive. Still watching. I think. I see cars parked outside my house that don't belong. I get phone calls where no one speaks. Asterisk. Asterisk. Maybe I'm paranoid. Maybe I'm losing my mind. Asterisk. Asterisk. Or maybe the past is finally catching up to me. Asterisk. Asterisk. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to protect her anymore. I don't know how to protect myself. Asterisk. Asterisk. God, forgive me for what I've done. Asterisk. Asterisk. God, help me for what I'm about to do. Asterisk. I closed the notebook. My hands were steady now. The shock had passed, replaced by something colder and more focused. I wasn't just a victim anymore, a confused daughter whose identity had been stolen. I was a witness, a detective, a woman with evidence. Diana had kept records, photographs, newspaper clippings, her own written confession. She documented everything, perhaps hoping that someday the truth would come out, or perhaps just needing to write it down, to make it real, to prove to herself that she wasn't completely insane. Either way, I had what I needed. I pulled out my phone and turned it back on. 17 missed calls from Diana, 8 from Sophie, 1 voicemail from a number I didn't recognize. I ignored them all and opened Google instead. I typed, Boston Police Cold Case Unit contact information. Then I typed, Marcus Webb, Boston Police. The search results loaded, and there, in the third link, was a photograph of a man in his late 50s wearing a police uniform. The caption read, Retired Detective Marcus Webb to receive Lifetime Achievement Award. He was still alive. He was still free. And he had no idea that the little girl he'd stolen 25 years ago had just found everything she needed to destroy him. I didn't go home that night. I checked into a motel off I-85, the kind of place that asked no questions and accepted cash. The room smelled like cigarette smoke and industrial cleaner, but it had Wi-Fi and a lock on the door, and that was all I needed. I spread Diana's evidence across the bed like a crime scene investigator laying out exhibits. The newspaper clippings, the photographs, the journal, my phone, open to the DNA results that had started this avalanche. Then I began to read every article, every word, every detail about the murder that had shaped my entire existence without my knowledge. The Boston Globe had covered the story extensively in November 2000. Catherine Marie Bennett, age 27, had been found dead in her apartment at 1847 Dudley Street in Roxbury on November 14th. A neighbor had called police after noticing her door ajar for 2 days and hearing no response to knocks. Officers discovered her body in the living room. Cause of death: blunt force trauma to the head. There were no signs of forced entry. Catherine's 3-year-old daughter, Emma, was nowhere to be found. Her bed had been slept in. Her toys were scattered across the floor. A half-eaten bowl of cereal sat on the kitchen table, the milk long since spoiled. The police initially theorized that the killer had taken the child either as a witness to eliminate or for more sinister purposes. An Amber Alert was issued. Search parties combed the neighborhood. Catherine's face appeared on the evening news, followed by a photograph of Emma, a toddler with dark curls and light eyes, wearing a red sweater with a snowman on the front. I remembered that sweater. Not consciously, not as a clear memory I could access and examine. But somewhere deep in the locked rooms of my mind, something stirred. A flash of red, a feeling of warmth, the echo of a voice saying, "Hold still, baby. Let me get your picture." My mother's voice. My real mother's voice. The investigation had stalled quickly. According to the articles, Boston police had interviewed dozens of witnesses, canvassed the neighborhood, and followed up on hundreds of tips. No suspects were ever publicly named. No arrests were ever made. Emma Bennett was never found. The last article in Diana's collection was dated 1 year after the murder. ***. 1 year later, Bennett murder remains unsolved. Daughter presumed dead. ***. Boston police have scaled back their investigation into the murder of Catherine Bennett and the disappearance of her daughter Emma, citing a lack of new leads. Detective Marcus Webb, who led the investigation, expressed frustration at the case's resolution. We followed every lead, interviewed every witness, and pursued every possible angle, Webb said in a statement. Unfortunately, sometimes cases go cold despite our best efforts. Our hearts go out to the Bennett family, and we want them to know that this case will never be officially closed. Catherine's mother, Eleanor Bennett, declined to comment, but has reportedly offered a $50,000 reward for information leading to the recovery of her granddaughter. I read the paragraph 3 times. Detective Marcus Webb, who led the investigation. The man who killed Catherine Bennett had been assigned to investigate her murder. The man who kidnapped me had stood in front of cameras and expressed sympathy for my grandmother while I slept in his house, called his wife Mommy, and slowly forgot that I'd ever been anyone other than Olivia Morgan. The audacity of it was breathtaking. The cruelty was incomprehensible. He hadn't just murdered my mother and stolen me. He'd inserted himself into the investigation, controlled the narrative, and ensured that no one would ever find the truth. I searched for more recent articles about Marcus Webb. The internet delivered a portrait of a decorated law enforcement officer, 32 years on the Boston Police Department, multiple commendations for bravery, a reputation as a tough, effective detective who closed cases others couldn't crack. He'd retired 5 years ago, at age 53, citing a desire to spend more time with family. According to his Facebook page, privacy settings apparently weren't a concern for a man who believed he'd gotten away with murder. He now lived in a suburb outside Boston with his second wife, a woman named Patricia, who smiled blandly in every photograph. He had 2 children from his second marriage, a boy and a girl, teenagers now. From the looks of it, he coached Little League. He volunteered at his church. He posted photographs of family barbecues and vacation trips and holiday gatherings. The smiling patriarch of a picture-perfect American family. And 25 years ago, he had bashed my mother's skull in and stolen her daughter. I don't remember making the decision to call Sophie, but suddenly her voice was in my ear, rough with sleep and worry. "Olivia? Jesus Christ, where are you? Diana's been calling me all night. She's out of her mind." "I found everything, Sophie." "What? Found what?" "Where are you?" Diana kept records. A storage unit full of evidence, newspaper articles, photographs, her own journal, confessing to everything. I know who killed my mother. I know who took me. Silence on the other end. Then, Liv, you need to slow down. You need to come home. And his name is Marcus Webb. He was Diana's husband. He was a Boston cop, the lead detective on my mother's murder case. He killed her because she was going to expose their affair. And then he took me and brought me home to Diana, like a fucking puppy. Oh my God. He's still out there, Sophie. Still alive. Still free. He retired 5 years ago, with a full pension and a commendation from the mayor. He coaches Little League. I laughed a harsh, brittle sound that didn't feel like it came from me. He coaches Little League, and my mother's been dead for 25 years, and her killer has never spent a single day in prison. Olivia, listen to me. You need to go to the police. You need to. The police? He was the police. His friends are still on the force. His buddies are probably the ones who would investigate if I walked in with this evidence. I was pacing now, the phone pressed to my ear. My free hand clenched into a fist. No, I need to do this right. I need to find someone who will actually listen. Someone who isn't in his pocket. What about the FBI? If it's a kidnapping case, it's been 25 years. The statute of limitations on kidnapping has probably expired, but murder has no statute of limitations. I stopped pacing, my mind suddenly clear. I need to find the cold case unit, someone who wasn't part of the original investigation. Someone who might actually want to solve this. And what about Diana? What about Diana made her choice 25 years ago. She chose to keep me instead of doing the right thing. She chose silence over justice. My voice hardened. I'm making a different choice. I hung up before Sophie could respond. Then I opened my laptop and searched. Boston Police, Cold Case Unit Detective. The first result was a news article from 6 months ago. Asterisk, Detective Rachel Torres takes helm of Boston Cold Case Unit. Vows to bring justice to forgotten victims. Asterisk. I clicked the link, and I began to write an email that would change everything. Detective Rachel Torres called me back within 6 hours. I'd sent the email at 3 a.m., not expecting a response for days, if ever. Cold case units were notoriously understaffed and overwhelmed, drowning in decades of unsolved murders and missing persons cases. I'd prepared myself for silence, for bureaucratic runarounds, for the slow death of hope that comes with fighting a system designed to protect its own. But at 9:17 a.m., my phone rang with a Boston area code. Is this Olivia Morgan? The voice was professional, clipped, with the faintest trace of a Boston accent. Speaking. This is Detective Rachel Torres, Boston Police Cold Case Unit. I received your email this morning regarding the Catherine Bennett homicide. A pause. I have to say, Miss Morgan, in 15 years of law enforcement, I've never received a message quite like yours. I imagine not. You're claiming to be Emma Bennett? The child who disappeared 25 years ago? I'm not claiming anything. I have DNA evidence, Detective. I have newspaper clippings, photographs, and a written confession from the woman who raised me. I have proof that I am Emma Bennett. And I have information about who killed my mother. Silence on the line. I could almost hear her processing, weighing my words against years of experience with cranks and false leads and desperate people grasping at cold cases for reasons of their own. Where are you right now? She finally asked. Charlotte, North Carolina. Can you get to Boston? I can be there tomorrow. Good. Come to the district, a 1 station on New Sudbury Street. Ask for me at the front desk. And, Miss Morgan. Her voice softened slightly. Bring everything you have. I drove through the night, 14 hours from Charlotte to Boston, fueled by gas station, coffee, and the relentless drumbeat of questions I couldn't answer. What would I find when I got there? Would Torres believe me? Would she be able to help? Or would Marcus Webb's connections reach even into the cold case unit? And underneath it all, the question I couldn't escape: who was I now? For 28 years, I'd been Olivia Morgan. I'd built an identity around that name, a career, friendships, a sense of self that felt solid and real. Now I was learning that Olivia Morgan was a fiction, a character created to hide a stolen child. But I couldn't simply become Emma Bennett either. Emma was a ghost, a 3-year-old, frozen in time, a face on missing posters that had long since faded and been forgotten. I didn't remember being Emma. I didn't remember Catherine or the apartment in Roxbury or the night that had ended my first life and begun my second. I was caught between two identities, belonging fully to neither. Somewhere around 2 a.m., crossing through New Jersey, I pulled over at a rest stop and cried. Not for myself, or not only for myself, for Catherine, who had died young and violent and unavenged. For Eleanor, who had spent 25 years believing her granddaughter was dead. For Diane, who had made terrible choices for complicated reasons and was now watching everything she'd built crumble. Even for Marcus Webb, in a strange way. For the man he might have been before he became a murderer. For the path not taken, the choice not made, the moment when everything could have been different. Then I wiped my eyes, bought another coffee, and kept driving. The District A1 station was a squat brick building in downtown Boston. Unremarkable except for the police cruisers parked outside. I arrived at 10 a.m., exhausted and wired, carrying a duffel bag stuffed with Diana's evidence. The officer at the front desk looked at me with the particular boredom of someone who'd seen everything and been impressed by nothing. "I'm here to see Detective Torres. She's expecting me." Name? Olivia Morgan. Or I hesitated. Emma Bennett. Something flickered in his eyes. Recognition? Curiosity? He picked up a phone, spoke quietly, then nodded. "Third floor. She'll meet you at the elevator." Detective Torres was waiting when the doors opened. She was younger than I'd expected, mid-40s, with dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and sharp brown eyes that seemed to catalog everything about me in a single glance. She wore a blazer over a simple blouse. No nonsense, but not unkind. "Miss Morgan." She extended her hand. "Thank you for coming. Thank you for believing me. Or at least, being willing to listen. I haven't decided what I believe yet, but I'm very interested in what you have to show me." She gestured down the hallway. "This way. We'll use one of the interview rooms." The room was small and sparse, a table, 4 chairs, a camera in the corner that Torres assured me was turned off. I set the duffel bag on the table and began to unpack 25 years of hidden evidence. Torres didn't interrupt as I laid it out. The DNA results proving I had no biological connection to Diana Morgan. The newspaper clippings documenting Catherine's murder and Emma's disappearance. The photographs of my real mother, young and alive, and holding me in her arms. Diana's journal, with its devastating entries spanning from the night of the murder to just weeks ago. When I finished, the table was covered with evidence, and Torres was staring at it like a woman who'd just discovered buried treasure. "Jesus Christ," she breathed. "There's more." I pulled out my phone and showed her the article about Marcus Webb's retirement. He was the lead detective on the original investigation. He was also Diana's husband at the time of the murder, and according to Diana's journal, he's the one who killed Catherine and brought me to her. Torres's expression shifted. I saw something move behind her eyes. Recognition. Maybe. Or the particular fury of a cop confronting another cop's betrayal. "Marcus Webb," she said slowly. "I know that name. He was a legend in the department. Closed more cases than anyone in his unit. Everyone respected him. Everyone was fooled by him. So it seems." She picked up Diana's journal, flipping to a random page. "This is admissible as evidence. You know, a written confession, even from a co-conspirator, is powerful stuff. Combined with the DNA results and your testimony, is it enough to arrest him?" Torres set down the journal. "Honestly, I don't know. This is compelling, but it's also circumstantial. We'd need more forensic evidence, Witness testimony. Something that directly ties Webb to the murder. What about Diana? She could testify against him. She could. But she's also complicit. Any defense attorney worth their salt would tear her apart on the stand, argue that she's lying to save herself, that she's the real killer, and she's framing Webb. Torres leaned back in her chair. No. If we're going to bring down a decorated detective for a 25-year-old murder, we need more than a journal and a DNA test. Then help me find more. Torres studied me for a long moment. I couldn't read her expression. Couldn't tell if she saw me as a victim, a witness, a nuisance, or something else entirely. The Bennett case has haunted this department for decades, she finally said. It was one of the first cold cases I read when I took this job. A young mother murdered. Her daughter vanished without a trace. It never sat right with me. The investigation felt incomplete. Like someone had deliberately left threads unpulled. Someone did. The killer was running the investigation. Yes. And now I finally understand why. She stood, gathering the evidence carefully. I'm going to need to verify everything you've shown me. The DNA results, the journal's authenticity, the chain of custody. For this evidence, it's going to take time. How much time? Weeks, maybe months. She saw my face fall and added, more gently, I know that's not what you want to hear, but if we rush this, if we make a single mistake, Webb walks. And men like him, men who've spent their whole careers learning how the system works, they know exactly how to exploit every weakness. So what do I do in the meantime? Torres handed me a card with her direct number. You wait. You stay safe. And you don't under any circumstances confront Marcus Webb on your own. I took the card, but even as I nodded my agreement, I knew I couldn't simply wait. Not while my mother's killer was coaching Little League and smiling for Facebook photographs. Not while Eleanor Bennett was still out there, still grieving a granddaughter she thought was dead. Some things couldn't wait for the system to catch up. I found Eleanor Bennett on a Tuesday afternoon. It wasn't hard, not with her name in the DNA database and a lifetime of digital footprints scattered across the internet. She lived in a small coastal town in Maine called Camden, about 3 hours north of Boston. According to her Facebook profile public, unlike Marcus Webb's carefully curated image, she was 78 years old, a retired librarian, and a widow. Her profile picture showed a woman with silver hair and kind eyes, standing on a rocky beach with the ocean stretching out behind her. She looked like someone who had learned to carry grief without letting it crush her. She looked like someone who deserved to know the truth. I sat in my rental car outside the Boston police station, Torres's card in one hand and my phone in the other, staring at Eleanor's contact information. The detective had told me to wait, to let the system work, to trust the process. But Eleanor Bennett had been waiting for 25 years. How could I ask her to wait even one more day? The drive to Camden took longer than expected. Spring in New England was unpredictable, and a late-season storm had blown in from the Atlantic, coating the highways in a thin layer of slush that made every mile feel treacherous. I white-knuckled the steering wheel through Massachusetts and New Hampshire, past bare trees and gray skies and towns that looked like postcards from another era. By the time I reached Camden, the storm had passed, and the sun was breaking through the clouds. The town was picture-perfect, a harbor filled with sailboats, streets lined with Victorian houses, the kind of place where people retired to escape the chaos of the world. Eleanor's house sat at the end of a quiet street, a modest Cape Cod with blue shutters, and a garden that had clearly been loved. Wind chimes hung from the porch, tinkling softly in the breeze. A cat watched me from the window as I approached. I stood on her doorstep for a full minute before I could bring myself to knock. What was I supposed to say? Hi. I'm your granddaughter who you thought was dead for 25 years? Hi. I have information about who killed your daughter? Hi. My entire existence is a lie, and I don't know who I am anymore? Before I could decide, the door opened. Eleanor Bennett stood in the doorway, smaller than I'd expected, wrapped in a cardigan that looked hand-knitted. She studied me with sharp blue eyes, eyes that I recognized. I realized with a jolt, eyes that I saw every morning in the mirror. "Can I help you?" she asked. "Mrs. Bennett?" My voice came out as a whisper. "Eleanor Bennett? Mrs. Bennett? Eleanor Bennett? My name is—" I stopped. What name should I use? The name I'd lived with for 28 years, or the name I'd been born with? "My name is Emma." Emma. The color drained from Eleanor's face. Emma. She repeated the name like it was a prayer, like it was a wound being reopened after decades of scar tissue. "Emma. Bennett? I think so. I mean, yes, I am. I'm Emma Bennett. I'm Catherine's daughter. I'm your granddaughter." For a long moment, Eleanor didn't move. She stood frozen in the doorway, one hand gripping the frame, her eyes searching my face for something. Some proof, some recognition, some sign that this wasn't a cruel joke. Then she reached up and touched my cheek. "You have her eyes," she whispered. "You have Kate's eyes." And she began to cry. We sat in her living room for hours. The house was full of photographs. Catherine as a baby, Catherine as a teenager, Catherine graduating from high school with a smile that looked exactly like mine. There were no pictures of me. No pictures of Emma. Those had been packed away, Eleanor explained, because seeing them was too painful. "They told me you were dead," she said, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea that had long since gone cold. "The police. They said you must have been taken by whoever killed Kate, that you were probably—" She couldn't finish the sentence. "I wasn't dead. I was in Boston. Then Charlotte." I stared at the photographs on the mantel, at the mother I didn't remember. A woman named Diana Morgan raised me. She told me I was her biological daughter. She never told me the truth. "Who is she? How did she get you?" "Her husband, Marcus Webb." Eleanor's expression shifted. "The detective? The one who investigated Kate's murder?" But he seemed so dedicated. He came to the house. He promised me he would find out what happened. He looked me in the eye and said he wouldn't rest until Emma was found. Her voice broke. He was lying the whole time? He wasn't just lying. He killed her, Eleanor. He killed Catherine, and he took me to cover his tracks. The words hung in the air between us. Eleanor set down her cup with shaking hands. "No," she breathed. "No, that can't be right. He was a police officer. He was supposed to protect people. I have proof." Diana kept a journal. She wrote everything down: how Marcus brought me home the night of the murder, how she found out later that he was the killer, how she was too afraid to go to the police because he threatened to kill her too. Then why? Why are you telling me this now? After 25 years? Because I just found out. A DNA test, I gave one to Diana for her birthday, not knowing. And when the results came back, everything unraveled. I leaned forward, taking her hands in mine. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry it took this long. I didn't know. I swear to you, I didn't know." Eleanor was crying again, quietly this time, tears streaming down her weathered face. But she didn't pull away from my grip. 25 years, she murmured. 25 years I've been mourning you. Lighting candles on your birthday, visiting Kate's grave and telling her I was sorry I couldn't protect you. You don't have to mourn anymore. I'm here. You're alive. She said the words, like she was testing them, like she couldn't quite believe they were real. My Emma is alive. I go by Olivia now. Or I did. I don't know who I am anymore. Eleanor reached up and cupped my face in her hands. "The way you might hold something precious and fragile. You're Emma Catherine Bennett," she said firmly. "You're my granddaughter. You're Kate's daughter. That's who you are. That's who you've always been, even when you didn't know it." She showed me the box that night. It was stored in her closet, behind winter coats and boxes of Christmas decorations. A simple cardboard box, labeled Emma in faded marker. Inside were the things she'd saved. My baby blanket, pink and worn soft from years of love. My first pair of shoes, impossibly tiny. a lock of dark hair from my first haircut, birthday cards she'd bought every year and never been able to send, stacked in a pile 25 deep. I couldn't throw them away, Eleanor explained. Even when everyone told me to move on, to accept that you were gone. I kept buying cards. I kept imagining what you might look like, what you might be doing, who you might become. I picked up the most recent card, a 28th birthday card, still in its envelope. This one's from a few weeks ago, March 15th. Your birthday. I never forgot. I opened the card. Inside, Eleanor had written, asterisk, happy birthday, Emma. Wherever you are, I hope you know you were loved. I hope you know you mattered. I hope someday, somehow, you find your way home. Asterisk. I was crying before I finished reading. I found my way home, I whispered. It took 25 years, but I found my way home. Eleanor pulled me into her arms, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt like I belonged. I stayed with Eleanor for a week, 7 days of learning who I was supposed to be. 7 days of photographs and stories, and tears that seemed to have no end. 7 days of sleeping in the guest room that Eleanor had secretly kept ready for me. Even after all these years, just in case, she said, her voice breaking on the words. She told me everything about Catherine. My mother had been a dreamer. She'd wanted to be a writer, had filled journals with stories and poems and fragments of novels she never finished. She'd gotten pregnant at 23, a surprise, Eleanor said carefully, but never a mistake, and had dropped out of college to raise me on her own. She never told me who your father was, Eleanor admitted. I asked, of course, many times, but she always said it didn't matter, that she was enough for you, that we were enough. Do you think she knew Marcus Webb before? I don't know. She worked as a waitress at a diner near the police station. She might have met him there. Eleanor's face hardened. He might have been watching her for months before he made his move. The thought made my skin crawl. A predator, circling my mother, waiting for the right moment to strike. What was she like? I asked. As a person, I mean. Not just as my mother. Eleanor smiled, the first real smile I'd seen from her since we'd met. She was stubborn. God, she was stubborn. Once she made up her mind about something, there was no changing it. She got that from her father. The smile faded slightly. She was also kind. Too kind. Sometimes. She saw the best in people, even when they didn't deserve it. I used to worry that someone would take advantage of that. Someone did. Yes. Someone did. On the third day, Eleanor showed me the grave. It was in a small cemetery on the outskirts of Camden, overlooking the ocean. Catherine's headstone was simple, just her name, her dates, and a line of poetry that Eleanor said had been her favorite. Asterisk. Though much is taken, much abides. Asterisk. Tennyson, Eleanor explained. From Ulysses. Kate loved that poem. She used to say it was about refusing to give up, no matter how much life took from you. I knelt in front of the stone, running my fingers over the carved letters of my mother's name. Catherine Marie Bennett, 1973 to 2000, 27 years old when she died, younger than I was now. I don't remember her, I whispered. I've tried. I've searched through every corner of my memory, looking for something, anything, but it's all blank. The first 3 years of my life are just gone. You were so young. It's not surprising that you don't remember, but I should remember something. Her voice, her face, the way she smelled or the songs she sang, or I pressed my palm flat against the cold stone. She was my mother. She loved me, and I can't remember a single moment we shared. Eleanor knelt beside me, her joints creaking in protest. Memory isn't everything, she said softly. You carry her with you in ways you don't even realize. The way you tilt your head when you're thinking, that's pure, Kate. The way you laugh, the way you cry, the stubbornness I can already see in your eyes. She lives on in you, Emma. Even if you don't remember her, she's there. It's not enough. No, it's not. Eleanor took my hand. But it's what we have, and we have to make it enough, because the alternative is letting grief consume us completely. On the 5th day, Eleanor asked the question I'd been dreading. What happens now? With the investigation, we were sitting on her porch, watching the sunset paint the ocean in shades of orange and pink. The beauty felt almost obscene, given what we were discussing. Detective Torres is reviewing the evidence. She says it could take weeks, maybe months, to build a case strong enough to arrest Marcus. Months. Eleanor's voice was flat. He's been free for 25 years, and now we have to wait months? She says if they rush it, he could walk. He knows the system. He knows how to exploit weaknesses in a case. And in the meantime, he just lives his life, coaches baseball, and goes to church, and pretends to be a good man. That's what Torres says. Torres is wrong. I turned to look at Eleanor. There was something in her eyes I hadn't seen before. A hardness, a determination that seemed at odds with the gentle grandmother I'd come to know. What do you mean? I mean, I've waited 25 years for justice. I've waited 25 years to know what happened to my daughter and my granddaughter. And now that I finally have answers, I'm not going to sit quietly while lawyers and detectives play their careful games. Eleanor, Torres said we shouldn't. I don't care what Torres said. Eleanor stood, her small frame suddenly seeming much larger. Marcus Webb murdered my child. He stole my grandchild. He let me spend a quarter century believing Emma was dead, while she was living 3 hours away with his ex-wife. And you're telling me I should wait patiently while the system that protected him for 25 years decides whether to finally hold him accountable? What are you suggesting? Eleanor's eyes met mine. I'm suggesting we stop waiting for other people to give us justice. I'm suggesting we take it ourselves. The plan came together over the next 2 days. Eleanor, it turned out, had never stopped investigating. Even after the police gave up, even after the media moved on, she had continued gathering information, interviewing old neighbors, collecting documents, building a file on everyone connected to Catherine's life and death. I always knew there was something wrong with the official investigation, she said, spreading papers across her kitchen table. Too many leads that were never followed. Too many witnesses who were never interviewed. It was like someone was deliberately steering the investigation away from the truth. Someone was. Marcus Webb. Yes, and now I know his name. She pointed to a folder thick with documents. This is everything I've collected over the years. Police reports, newspaper articles, my own notes. There's something in here there has to be that can help us. I picked up the folder and began to read. Most of it was familiar, the same information I'd found in Diana's storage unit, the same articles I'd read in the motel room. But there were things here that Diana hadn't collected. Witness statements from neighbors who remembered hearing arguments in Catherine's apartment in the weeks before her death. A man's voice, they said, angry, threatening. And then, buried near the bottom of the pile, I found something that made my blood run cold. A photograph. It was grainy, taken from a distance, clearly, without the subject's knowledge. But the man in the image was unmistakably Marcus Webb. Younger, thinner, but with the same cold eyes I'd seen in his Facebook photos. He was standing outside Catherine's apartment building. The timestamp on the back read, the 12th of November, 2000. 2 days before her murder, Eleanor. My voice was barely a whisper. Where did you get this? A neighbor. Mrs. Patterson. She lived across the street. She was paranoid, used to photograph everyone who came and went from the building. After Kate died, she gave me copies of everything she had. I never knew what I was looking for until now. I stared at the photograph. Proof. Physical, tangible proof that Marcus Webb had been at Catherine's apartment before the murder, not as an investigating officer, as a stalker, as a killer casing his prey. We need to show this to Torres. I said, we will. Eleanor's voice was steel. But first, We're going to find everything else Mrs. Patterson might have. And then we're going to bury Marcus Webb so deep he'll never see daylight again. Mrs. Patterson lived in a nursing home now. Eleanor had kept in touch over the years, Christmas cards, occasional phone calls, the kind of connection that forms between people who share a tragedy. Margaret Patterson had been 73 when Catherine was murdered. Now she was 98, confined to a wheelchair. Her body failing, but her mind still sharp. She never forgot, Eleanor said, as we drove to the facility in Bangor. Every time I visited, she asked if there was any news, any leads. She blamed herself, said she should have done more. Should have reported the man she kept seeing outside Kate's building. She photographed him. That's more than most people would have done. She photographed everyone. Margaret was particular. Some people called her paranoid. Others called her a busybody. But she saw things. She noticed things. And she kept records. Do you think she has more? Eleanor gripped the steering wheel tighter. I think Margaret Patterson might have been documenting Marcus Webb for weeks before Kate died. And I think no one ever asked her the right questions. The nursing home was clean and bright, filled with the artificial cheer of places designed to make dying feel less lonely. Eleanor signed us in at the front desk, and a nurse led us to Margaret's room, a small private space with a window overlooking a garden. Margaret was sitting in her wheelchair when we entered, a blanket across her lap, her white hair thin but neatly combed. She looked up as we approached, and her eyes, cloudy with age but still alert, widened with recognition. Eleanor. Her voice was reedy, fragile. It's been too long. I know, Margaret. I'm sorry. But I'm here now, and I brought someone I want you to meet. I stepped forward, suddenly nervous. This woman had known my mother, had watched over her in her own strange way, had documented the man who would eventually kill her. Margaret, this is Emma, Catherine's daughter. The old woman's hand flew to her mouth. Emma? Little Emma? Tears began streaming down her wrinkled cheeks. But they told us you were. I know. Everyone thought I was dead, but I wasn't. I was taken by the man you photographed outside my mother's apartment. Margaret's face transformed. The frailty fell away, replaced by something fierce and burning. I knew it, she hissed. I knew something was wrong with that man. The way he watched her, the way he lurked. I told the police. I told them about the man with the cold eyes, but they didn't listen. They said I was confused. They said I was imagining things. Who did you tell, Margaret? The detective, the one in charge of the case. I showed him my photographs and told him I'd seen this man outside Kate's building multiple times. He took the pictures and said he'd look into it, but nothing ever happened. Nothing. Ever. She stopped. Her eyes went wide. The detective, she whispered. The man in the photographs. They were the same person, weren't they? I nodded slowly. His name is Marcus Webb. He was the lead investigator on my mother's case, and he was also her killer. Margaret's room became our evidence room. Over the next 3 hours, the old woman directed us through decades of accumulated documentation. She'd been photographing her neighborhood for years, a habit born from insomnia and suspicion, she explained, that had become a compulsion after her husband died. I couldn't sleep, she said. So I watched. And when I watched, I took pictures. It made me feel safe, like I was keeping a record of everything, just in case. She'd kept boxes of photographs in storage boxes that the nursing home had moved when she'd transitioned from independent living. A nurse retrieved them for us. 3 cardboard containers filled with envelopes organized by date. We found what we were looking for in the October and November 2000 folder. Dozens of photographs. Marcus Webb's car parked on the street. Marcus Webb walking toward Catherine's building. Marcus Webb standing in the shadows, watching the windows. Marcus Webb leaving in the early morning hours, his collar turned up against the cold. He came almost every night in October, Margaret said, pointing to the timestamps she'd written on the back of each photo. Sometimes he went inside. Sometimes he just watched. I thought maybe he was her boyfriend. But boyfriends don't lurk in shadows. Boyfriends don't look at women like they're prey. The photographs told a story of obsession, of surveillance, of a predator circling closer and closer to his victim. October 3rd. Marcus's car, parked across the street at 10:47 p.m. October 11th. Marcus entering the building at 11:23 p.m., leaving at 2:14 a.m. October 19th. Marcus arguing with Catherine in the parking lot. Even in the grainy photograph, I could see my mother's defensive posture, her arms crossed over her chest. October 28th. Marcus, standing outside Catherine's window, looking up. The timestamp, read 3:30 a.m. November 5th. Catherine, leaving the building with a suitcase. She looked scared. November 8th. Catherine, returning, the suitcase gone. She looked defeated. November 12th. Marcus, outside the building again. The last photograph, before the murder. She tried to leave, I said, staring at the November 5th image. She packed a bag and tried to run, and he brought her back. Eleanor finished. Or convinced her to come back. Or threatened her. 3 days later, she was dead. The final envelope contained something different. Not photographs of Marcus, but photographs of the crime scene itself. Margaret, unable to sleep, had been at her window when the police arrived on November 14th. She documented everything: the officers entering the building, the medical examiner's van, the stretcher carrying a black body bag, and, in one chilling image, Marcus Webb standing outside the building, directing the investigation. He was smiling. It was subtle, just a slight upturn at the corners of his mouth, visible only if you knew to look for it. But it was there. A smile of satisfaction. A smile of triumph. The man who had murdered my mother was smiling at her crime scene. I need copies of all of these, I said, my voice shaking. Every single photograph. And I need Margaret to write a statement describing what she saw, what she told the police, and how they responded. I'll do better than that, Margaret said, her voice stronger than it had been all day. I'll testify. Put me in a wheelchair. Put me on a witness stand, and I'll tell everyone exactly what I saw. I've waited 25 years to be believed. I'm not going to waste another day. Eleanor squeezed the old woman's hand. Thank you, Margaret. Thank you for never giving up. I never stopped watching, Margaret said, her eyes fixed on the photographs spread across her bed. Even after everyone else looked away, I never stopped watching. I gathered the evidence carefully. Each photograph a piece of a puzzle that was finally coming together. Marcus Webb had been stalking my mother for weeks. He had controlled the investigation into her murder. He had stolen me and hidden me in plain sight. And now, finally, there were witnesses. There was proof. There was a case that even the most corrupt system couldn't ignore. Detective Torres met us at a diner outside Boston. She'd insisted on somewhere neutral, not the police station, not Eleanor's house, not anywhere that might attract attention. If what you're telling me is true, she'd said on the phone, then we're dealing with someone who still has friends in the department. We need to be careful. The diner was half empty at 2 p.m. on a Wednesday. Just a few truckers nursing coffee and a waitress who looked like she'd seen everything and been surprised by nothing. We took a booth in the back corner, away from the windows. Torres arrived 10 minutes after us, carrying a battered briefcase and wearing the same no-nonsense expression I remembered from our first meeting. She slid into the booth across from me and Eleanor, ordered black coffee, and got straight to business. Show me what you found. I spread Margaret Patterson's photographs across the table. The surveillance images, the timeline of Marcus's stalking. Torres studied each one carefully, her face betraying nothing. Mrs. Patterson is willing to testify, Eleanor said. She'll swear under oath that she reported this man to the lead detective and was ignored. The lead detective being Marcus Webb. Torres picked up the crime scene photograph, holding it close to examine Marcus's expression. "Son of a bitch," she murmured. "He's actually smiling. He thought he'd gotten away with it," I said. "He thought no one would ever know." Torres set down the photograph and reached into her briefcase. "I've been doing some digging of my own. After you came to see me, I pulled the original case files from storage. 25 years in a basement, covered in dust. No one had touched them since the case went cold." She laid a thick folder on the table. "What did you find?" Eleanor asked. "Gaps. Inconsistencies. Leads that were documented but never followed up. Witnesses who were interviewed once and then forgotten." Torres opened the folder, pointing to a specific page. "Look at this. 3 days after the murder, a woman named Sandra Chen called the tip line. She worked at the diner where Catherine waited tables. She told the officer who answered that Catherine had been scared in the weeks before her death, said she was being harassed by a man who wouldn't leave her alone." "Marcus," I said. "Sandra Chen described him as a cop, or someone who looked like a cop. She said Catherine had mentioned that the man had threatened her, told her she couldn't leave him." Torres flipped to another page. "The call was logged. The information was recorded. And then, nothing. No follow-up interview. No investigation. The lead just disappeared. Because Marcus was controlling the case." "Exactly. He was the gatekeeper. Every piece of information flowed through him. He decided what was relevant and what wasn't. He decided which leads to pursue and which to bury." Eleanor's hands were shaking. "How many others? How many witnesses did he silence?" Torres pulled out another document. "At least 6. I found 6 separate tips that were documented but never investigated, all of them pointing toward a male stalker, all of them describing behavior consistent with what Mrs. Patterson photographed. He was hiding in plain sight," I said, "using his position to destroy any evidence that might lead back to him. It gets worse." Torres's voice dropped. "I also found the autopsy report. The autopsy photographs were clinical, detached, the kind of images designed to document rather than disturb. But nothing could make them less horrifying. Catherine Bennett had been struck multiple times on the head with a heavy object, later identified as a metal bookend found at the scene. She had defensive wounds on her hands and forearms, indicating she'd tried to fight back. There were bruises on her wrists, consistent with being restrained. She struggled," Torres said quietly. "She didn't go easily." "Of course she didn't," Eleanor whispered. "My Kate was a fighter." But it was the final page of the autopsy report that made my blood freeze. "The medical examiner noted something unusual," Torres said. "Trace evidence under Catherine's fingernails. Skin cells and blood that didn't match her own." "She scratched him," I said. "She scratched her attacker." "Yes. And in any normal investigation, that evidence would have been processed immediately. DNA comparison would have been done against anyone connected to the victim, co-workers, neighbors, known associates. Let me guess. It was never processed." Torres nodded grimly. "The samples were collected and logged. Then they vanished from the evidence chain. According to the records, they were lost during transfer to the state crime lab. Marcus destroyed them, almost certainly. He couldn't risk having his DNA compared to what was found under Catherine's nails." Torres closed the folder. "But here's the thing. In 2000, DNA technology was relatively primitive compared to what we have now. Evidence handling protocols were looser. A lot of samples from that era were improperly stored or mishandled. So even if we found them, they might be useless? Maybe. But we don't need them." Torres's eyes met mine, "because I found something else. Something Marcus didn't know to destroy." She reached into her briefcase and pulled out a plastic evidence bag. Inside was a small object, a button. Dark blue, about the size of a dime. This was collected from Catherine's apartment but was never logged as significant evidence. It was found near her body, separated from any garment at the scene. The original investigators assumed it came from Catherine's clothing, but I checked, it doesn't match anything she was wearing that night. "Whose is it?" "I don't know yet. But look at the design. I peered at the button through the plastic. It was distinctive, not a standard button, but something with a specific pattern. An eagle clutching arrows in its talons. That's a police uniform button, Torres said. Specifically, it's from a Boston PD dress uniform, circa late 1990s. They changed the design in 2003, Eleanor gasped. He was wearing his uniform when he killed her, or he'd recently worn it. Either way, this button places a Boston police officer at the scene of Catherine's murder. Torres carefully tucked the evidence bag back into her briefcase. I've already submitted a request to compare this button against Marcus Webb's service records. If his uniform was ever reported missing a button or sent for repair during that period, we'll have physical evidence tying him to the crime. Will that be enough? I asked. To arrest him? Torres was quiet for a moment. Combined with everything else, Mrs. Patterson's photographs, Diana's journal, the suppressed witness statements, the destroyed DNA evidence, yes, I think it's enough to bring charges. She paused. But I need you to understand something. Marcus Webb was a decorated detective. He has friends. He has connections. There are people in this department who won't want to believe that one of their own is a murderer. What are you saying? I'm saying that when I bring this case forward, there's going to be resistance. People are going to try to bury it again. And if they succeed, she looked at me with something close to respect. If they succeed, I need to know that you won't give up, that you'll keep fighting, even if the system fails you. I thought about Catherine, about the mother I couldn't remember, who had fought and struggled and died trying to protect herself, who had scratched her killer hard enough to draw blood, even knowing she couldn't win. I won't give up, I said. Not ever. Torres smiled, the first real smile I'd seen from her. Good. Then let's bring this bastard down. The pieces were falling into place too neatly. That's what bothered me as I lay awake in Eleanor's guest room that night, staring at the ceiling and running through everything we'd discovered. The photographs, the suppressed witnesses, the uniform button, Diana's journal. Each piece of evidence pointed inexorably toward Marcus Webb, building a case that seemed almost too perfect, almost like someone had designed it that way. I sat up in bed, a cold realization washing over me. Diana had kept records for 25 years, meticulous records, a journal documenting everything Marcus had done, everything she'd witnessed, everything she'd been too afraid to report. And she'd stored those records in a facility 20 miles from her house, under her maiden name, in a place only she knew about. Why? Why keep evidence of a murder if you were never going to use it? Unless you were planning to use it someday. Unless you were waiting for the right moment. Unless you'd been preparing, all along, for the day when the truth would finally come out. I grabbed my phone and dialed Diana's number before I could talk myself out of it. She answered on the second ring. Olivia? Her voice was rough, exhausted. Is that you? Why did you keep the journal? Silence. 25 years, Diana. 25 years of documenting everything Marcus did. You didn't keep those records because you were afraid. You kept them because you were waiting. Olivia, please. You knew this day would come. You knew eventually I'd find out the truth, or someone would. And when that happened, you wanted to make sure there was enough evidence to destroy him. More silence. Then, quietly, you're right. The confession came out slowly, haltingly. I never stopped hating him, Diana said. Not for a single day. Every time I looked at you, I saw what he'd done. Every time you called me, Mom, I heard Catherine's voice, asking where her daughter was. I lived with that guilt every minute of every day for 25 years. Then why didn't you go to the police? Why didn't you? Because I was complicit. Don't you understand? The moment I kept you, the moment I didn't call 911, I became an accessory. If I turned Marcus in, I'd go to prison too. And then what would happen to you? You'd be alone. You'd end up in foster care. Bounced from home to home, never knowing who you really were. So you stayed silent to protect me? I stayed silent because I was a coward. Because I told myself that keeping you safe was more important than justice for Catherine. Because it was easier to live with the lie than to face the truth. I gripped the phone tighter. But you kept the evidence. You documented everything. Insurance, Diana admitted. Marcus threatened me constantly in those early years. Said if I ever talked, he'd kill us both. But I knew that as long as I had proof of what he'd done, he couldn't touch me. If anything happened to me, the evidence would come out. He knew that. It's the only reason we're both still alive. So you were blackmailing each other. You, with the journal. Him with what? The threat of exposing you as a kidnapper? Mutually assured destruction. Diana's laugh was bitter, broken. That's what our relationship became after the divorce. Two people who hated each other. Bound together by secrets. Neither could afford to reveal. I processed this for a long moment. Diana wasn't just a frightened woman who'd made terrible choices. She was a strategist, a survivor. Someone who had spent 25 years building a weapon and waiting for the right moment to use it. The DNA test, I said slowly. When I gave it to you for your birthday, that was the trigger, wasn't it? You knew that once I found out the truth, there was no going back. You knew I'd find the evidence and use it. I hoped you would. You hoped? I've wanted Marcus to pay for what he did since the day I found out the truth. But I couldn't be the one to expose him, not without destroying both of us. I needed someone else to find the evidence. Someone who wasn't complicit. Someone who could bring him down without bringing me down too. You used me. I gave you the tools to find justice. What you did with them was your choice. Rage boiled up inside me. My choice? You call this a choice? You lied to me. For 28 years. You let me believe you were my mother. You let me love you while you were hoarding evidence of my real mother's murder like some kind of insurance policy. Everything I did to protect you. No. Everything you did to protect yourself. I was just collateral. I hung up before she could respond. But as the anger faded, something else took its place. Clarity. Diana had manipulated me. She'd used my discovery of the truth as a weapon against Marcus, positioning me to do what she'd been too afraid to do herself. It was calculating, self-serving, and deeply wrong. But it had also worked. Because of her records, we had a documented confession. Because of her paranoia, we had 25 years of evidence. Because of her fear of Marcus, she'd preserved everything we needed to bring him to justice. The realization didn't make me forgive her, but it made me understand something important. Diana wasn't a villain. She wasn't a hero either. She was something more complicated, a woman who had made impossible choices in impossible circumstances, who had tried to protect a stolen child while living in the shadow of a murderer who had spent a quarter century trapped between guilt and fear. She had done terrible things, but she had also given me life. Not the life I was supposed to have, but a life nonetheless. 28 years of birthday parties and bedtime stories, of scraped knees, bandaged, and heartbreaks consoled. 28 years of being loved, even if that love was built on lies. I didn't know what to do with that, but I knew what I had to do next. I called Torres the next morning. I need to tell you something about Diana Morgan, something that changes the case. I'm listening. She wasn't just a passive participant. She kept the evidence deliberately, as leverage against Marcus. She's been waiting for 25 years for someone to find it and use it against him. Torres was quiet for a moment. Are you saying she engineered this? Your discovery? The investigation? All of it? Not engineered. More like enabled. She set up the dominoes. I just knocked them over. That's complicated. Everything about this case is complicated. I took a deep breath. But here's what matters. She's willing to testify, not just about what Marcus did, but about her own role. The whole truth. She'll accept whatever consequences come from that. You've talked to her? Last night. She knows she's going to prison. She's accepted it. But she wants Marcus to go down first. Torres was silent for so long I thought the call had dropped. Then, if Diana testifies, if she admits to her role in concealing you, we'll have an airtight case. Her testimony combined with the physical evidence, the photographs, the suppressed witness statements. Marcus won't be able to talk his way out of it. Then let's make it happen. There's one more thing we need first. Torres's voice hardened. We need to find Sandra Chen. She's the witness who reported the stalking in 2000. If she's still alive, if she can corroborate what she told the police and testify that Marcus ignored her report, that's obstruction of justice on top of murder. Where do we start? I've got an address. Last known location. About 15 miles from here. Torres paused. Feel like taking a drive? I looked out the window at the Maine coastline, at the ocean that had witnessed 25 years of Eleanor's grief. I'll be there in 3 hours. Sandra Chen lived in a triple-decker in Dorchester, the kind of faded Victorian that had housed generations of Boston's working class. The paint was peeling. The porch sagged, but flower boxes lined the windows. Someone still cared about this place, even if time hadn't been kind to it. Torres and I climbed the stairs to the second-floor apartment. My heart was pounding. This woman had known my mother, had worked beside her, had tried to save her, only to be ignored by the very man who would kill her. Torres knocked. Footsteps approached. The door opened a crack, held by a chain. Who is it? Detective Rachel Torres, Boston Police. I'm looking for Sandra Chen? That's me. What do you want? I want to talk about Catherine Bennett. The door went still. Through the crack, I could see a woman's face. Asian, mid-50s, with wary eyes and silver threads in her black hair. She studied us for a long moment. That was 25 years ago. Why are you asking now? Because I think you tried to tell the truth back then. And nobody listened. I'm listening now. The chain rattled. The door opened. You'd better come in. Sandra's apartment was small but immaculate. A living room crowded with mismatched furniture, walls covered in photographs of children and grandchildren. She gestured us toward a worn sofa and disappeared into the kitchen, returning with a pot of tea and 3 cups. I've waited a long time for someone to ask about Kate, she said, pouring with steady hands. We haven't forgotten, I said. I'm Emma, Catherine's daughter. Sandra's cup froze halfway to her lips. Emma? Little Emma? Her eyes filled with tears. But they said, the police said, I was taken by the man who killed her. I only found out the truth a few weeks ago. Sandra set down her cup with trembling hands. My God, all these years, I wondered what happened to you. I used to dream about you sometimes. This little girl with dark curls, asking where her mama went. She wiped her eyes. You look like her. You know, you look exactly like Kate. Tell me about her. Tell me about the man who was stalking her. Sandra's expression hardened. That cop. The one with the cold eyes. Marcus Webb. I never knew his name. Kate wouldn't tell me. But I knew he was police. She let that slip once. Said he'd told her that no one would believe her over him. That he could do whatever he wanted, and there was nothing she could do about it. Torres leaned forward. How did they meet? At the diner. He used to come in almost every day, sat in Kate's section, always ordered the same thing. Coffee. Black. Eggs over easy. She thought he was just a regular at first, flirted with her a little. The way men do. She was young. Pretty. Struggling to make ends meet. Maybe she was flattered by the attention. When did it change? Sandra's jaw tightened. About 3 months before she died, he started showing up outside the diner after her shifts, following her home, leaving notes on her car. Kate tried to brush it off at first, said he was harmless, just lonely. But then what? Then she found out she was pregnant. The words hung in the air like a bomb waiting to detonate. Pregnant? I managed. My mother was pregnant when she died? Sandra nodded slowly. About 8 weeks along, she told me. She was terrified. Not because she didn't want the baby. Kate loved being a mother. She would have loved having another child. She was terrified because of who the father was. Marcus Webb. She never said his name. But I knew. Who else could it have been? She wasn't seeing anyone. She didn't have time for dating between work and raising you. The only man in her life was him, the cop who wouldn't leave her alone. Torres was scribbling notes furiously. Did she tell him? About the pregnancy? That's when everything got bad. She told him because she thought, I don't know. Maybe she thought it would change things. Maybe she thought he'd step up, or at least leave her alone. But instead, he got angry, said she was trying to trap him. Said she was going to ruin his career, his marriage, his life, his marriage, I repeated. To Diana, he was married? Sandra looked surprised. Kate never mentioned that. She might not have known, she thought. Sandra shook her head sadly. She thought he loved her, at least in the beginning. She thought all the attention meant something, but it was just obsession, possession. He didn't want to love her, he wanted to own her. Sandra excused herself for a moment, disappearing into a back room. She returned, carrying a small cardboard box. I kept these, she said, setting the box on the coffee table. After Kate died, I went to her apartment before the police finished processing the scene. I still had a key. She'd given it to me in case of emergencies. Things I thought might be important someday. Inside the box were letters. Handwritten letters. Some on plain notebook paper. Others on what looked like official police stationery. I picked up the first one, my hands trembling. Kate. 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 Asterisk. I can't stop thinking about you. The way you smile. The way you smell. The way you look at me like I'm the only man in the world. Nobody has ever made me feel the way you make me feel. Asterisk. Asterisk. I know I said we need to be careful, but I don't care anymore. I don't care about the job or the marriage or any of it. All I care about is you. Asterisk. Asterisk. Soon, baby. Soon we'll be together. I promise. Asterisk. I felt sick. The letters documented the entire progression of their relationship, from early infatuation to growing obsession to naked threats. The later ones were darker, more desperate. Asterisk. You think you can just walk away from me? After everything I've done for you? After everything I've risked? Asterisk. Asterisk. You belong to me, Kate. You and Emma both. Don't ever forget that. Asterisk. And the last letter, dated the 10th of November, 2000, 4 days before her murder. Asterisk. I warned you what would happen if you tried to leave. I warned you what would happen if you told anyone about us. You've made your choice. Now you'll live with the consequences. Asterisk. Asterisk. Or you won't live at all. Asterisk. Torres carefully placed the letter in an evidence bag. This is a direct threat. Written and signed, combined with everything else. She looked at me, her eyes bright with something that might have been triumph. We've got him, Emma. We've finally got him. But there was one more thing in Sandra's box. A photograph, small and faded, tucked beneath the letters. It showed Catherine and Marcus together. They were at what looked like a park, sitting on a bench, his arm around her shoulders. Catherine was smiling, but her eyes looked uncertain. Marcus was staring directly at the camera, his expression possessive, proprietary, and Catherine's hand was resting on her stomach. The slight curve was barely visible, but it was there. My mother had been carrying my sibling when Marcus Webb killed her. He hadn't just murdered Catherine. He'd murdered his own unborn child. Sandra Chen lived in a triple-decker in Dorchester, the kind of faded Victorian that had housed generations of Boston's working class. The paint was peeling, the porch sagging under decades of New England winters, but the flower boxes in the windows were bright with fresh marigolds. I knocked twice before the door opened, revealing a woman in her mid-50s with silver-streaked black hair and eyes that held 25 years of unspoken grief. Emma Bennett, she said. Not a question. Detective Torres told me you'd come. You look just like her. The apartment was small but immaculate. Every surface covered with photographs and plants and the accumulated treasures of a life lived carefully. Sandra led me to a kitchen table where 2 cups of tea already waited, steam rising in the afternoon light. I loved your mother, she said simply. Not the way Marcus thought. We were friends, best friends. The kind of friendship that gets complicated when you're young and lonely and married to men who don't see you. She pushed a photograph across the table. Catherine and Sandra at a beach, arms around each other, laughing at something off camera. My mother looked happy in a way I'd never seen in Eleanor's formal portraits. We met at the community center. I was teaching ESL classes. She was volunteering in the childcare room. She'd bring you sometimes. You called me Auntie San. Sandra's voice cracked. You probably don't remember. I didn't. But something in my chest ached at the lost memory. Marcus saw us together one afternoon. Catherine was crying about something I don't even remember what, and I was holding her. Just holding her. He decided we were having an affair. Were you? Sandra's smile was sad. Would it matter if we were? Would it justify what he did? No. I just want to understand. We kissed once. Just once. At her apartment, after too much wine and too many tears about our terrible marriages. We both felt guilty about it for weeks. But for Marcus, that was enough. He started following Catherine, showing up at her job, her church, the grocery store. She was terrified. The stalking report, I said. Sandra nodded. I went with her to file it. The officer at the desk, young guy, nervous, took one look at Marcus's badge number and suddenly couldn't find the right forms. The report disappeared before the ink was dry. She rose and retrieved a manila folder from a drawer, worn at the edges from years of handling. I kept everything. Catherine's letters, text messages we printed out, they still did that back then. My own notes, from every time she called me scared. I opened the folder. The letters were in my mother's handwriting. I recognized it from Eleanor's collection. But these were different. Raw. Desperate. Asterisk. He knows about Emma. He said if I don't stop seeing you, he'll make sure I never see her again. I'm so scared, Sandra. I think he might actually hurt me. Asterisk. The date was November 10th, 2000. 4 days before she died. I called the police after she was murdered, Sandra said. I told them about Marcus, about the stalking, about his threats. They said they'd look into it. Detective Webb himself called me back to say they were pursuing other leads. He investigated himself and found himself innocent. The bitterness in her voice could have stripped paint. I tried going to internal affairs. I wrote to the district attorney. I even contacted a journalist. Everyone told me the same thing. I was a grieving woman, making accusations without proof. But you had proof. Sandra's hands wrapped around her teacup. I had letters from a dead woman accusing a decorated detective of stalking. I had my word against his. In 2000, that meant nothing. It means something now, I said. Will you testify? She was quiet for a long moment, watching the steam rise from her cup. 25 years I've waited for someone to ask that question. She looked up, and there were tears on her cheeks. Yes, I'll testify. For Catherine, for you, for every woman who was told her fear didn't matter. The conference room at District A1 smelled like burnt coffee and anticipation. Detective Torres had arranged the evidence across 3 folding tables, each piece tagged and catalogued with the precision of someone building a case she couldn't afford to lose. 25 years, she said, surveying the collection. 25 years this case sat in a box in our basement. And now look at it. I looked. Diana's journal, photocopied and annotated. Margaret Patterson's 43 photographs, each one time-stamped and authenticated. Sandra Chen's letters, preserved in plastic sleeves. The original police report with its suspicious gaps highlighted in yellow. The uniform button, now confirmed through metallurgical analysis to match Boston PD standard issue from 1998, to 2002. And at the center of it all, a single document that had taken 3 weeks to obtain. Marcus Webb's personnel file, secured through a court order after Torres convinced a sympathetic judge that a decorated detective might have investigated his own crime. His alibi was that he was on duty the night of the murder, Torres explained. Logged in at the station from 6 p.m. to 2 a.m. But look at this. She pointed to a line in the duty roster. Officer James Riley signed Webb out at 9:47 p.m. for a wellness check. Webb didn't sign back in until 11:52 p.m., 2 hours unaccounted for. The medical examiner estimated time of death between 9 and 11 p.m., I said. Exactly. Torres's smile was sharp. And Officer Riley? He retired in 2005. Lives in Florida now. I called him yesterday. My heart stopped. What did he say? He said Webb asked him to cover. Said he had personal business to handle and would owe him one. Riley didn't think anything of it at the time. Cops covered for each other constantly back then. But when he heard about the murder the next day, he got nervous. Webb told him to keep quiet, that it would look bad for both of them. He's willing to testify? He's 73 years old with stage 4 lung cancer. He said. Torres paused, checking her notes. He said he spent 25 years trying to forget that night, and he'd like to meet his maker with a clean conscience. The weight of it pressed against my chest. All these years, all these people carrying pieces of the truth, too afraid or too powerless to speak. And now, one by one, they were stepping forward. Is it enough? I asked. For a warrant? Torres gathered the documents into a neat stack. I presented everything to the district attorney this morning. She agrees we have probable cause for arrest on first-degree murder charges. She met my eyes. Judge Harrison signed the warrant an hour ago. The room tilted slightly. I gripped the edge of the table. When? Tomorrow morning. 6 a.m. We're coordinating with the FBI since Webb still has contacts in local law enforcement. We can't risk him being tipped off. 25 years. My mother had been dead for 25 years, and tomorrow, finally, the man who killed her would face justice. There's something else, Torres said carefully. The DA wants to know if you'll be present at the arrest. As the victim's daughter, you have the right to be there, but I have to warn you, it won't be easy. Webb will likely resist. There may be unpleasantness. I thought about my mother, 27 years old, alone in her apartment with a 3-year-old daughter. I thought about her final moments, facing the man who had stalked her for months, knowing no one would believe her, knowing no one would save her. I'll be there, I said. Torres nodded, something like respect in her eyes. 6 a.m. Wear dark clothes, stay behind the line, and Emma? She used my real name deliberately. Whatever happens tomorrow, your mother would be proud of you. I drove back to Eleanor's house as the sun set over Boston Harbor, painting the water in shades of gold and crimson. Tomorrow, Marcus Webb would wake up in his comfortable suburban home, kiss his wife goodbye, maybe plan his day around golf or grandchildren, and then the past would finally catch up with him. The morning air was cold enough to see my breath, hanging in small clouds that disappeared into the pre-dawn darkness. I stood behind a police barricade at the end of Maple Street, watching Marcus Webb's house, a white colonial with black shutters and an American flag hanging from the porch. It looked so ordinary, so safe. Detective Torres had positioned me between 2 FBI agents, both of them silent and watchful. 12 officers surrounded the property, their dark uniforms blending into the shadows of neighboring yards. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. 60 seconds. I thought about my mother waking up on November 14th, 2000. Had she sensed something was wrong? Had she looked at 3-year-old me sleeping in my crib and felt afraid? Or had it been just another morning, ordinary and safe, until it wasn't? 30 seconds. A light flickered on in the upstairs window. Someone was awake. The front door exploded inward. Officers poured through the opening, their shouts of, "Police! Search warrant! Echoing through the quiet neighborhood. Lights blazed on in houses up and down the street. A woman screamed inside Patricia Webb. I assumed, waking to find her comfortable life shattered. And then, through the chaos, I heard his voice for the first time. This is a mistake. I'm a decorated officer. Do you know who I am? They brought him out in handcuffs, wearing a bathrobe and slippers, his gray hair disheveled and his face contorted with rage. Marcus Webb, 58 years old, 32 years on the force, youth baseball coach, church volunteer, murderer. He looked smaller than I'd imagined. Older. Just a man in a bathrobe, blinking against the flashing lights of police cars. And then his eyes found mine. I don't know what I expected. Recognition, maybe. Fear. Guilt. Instead, I saw calculation. His gaze swept over me, categorizing, assessing. And I watched the moment he understood who I was. Emma, he said softly. Not a question. The officers paused, confused by the name. But I stepped forward, stopping just at the edge of the barricade. My name is Emma Bennett, I said clearly. Catherine Bennett was my mother, and you killed her. Something shifted in his face. The rage drained away, replaced by something colder, more dangerous. You don't know what you're talking about, little girl. Your mother was troubled, unstable. Whatever stories people have been telling you. We have photographs. I cut him off. 43 photographs of you stalking her for 2 months before she died. We have letters where she described your threats. We have the duty roster showing you left the station for 2 hours on the night she was murdered. We have Officer Riley's statement that you asked him to cover for you. Webb's jaw tightened. Riley is a dying old man who'll say anything for attention. We have your uniform button, I continued, recovered from my mother's apartment. Diana. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. Diana is a mentally ill woman who, Diana is going to testify against you. So is Sandra Chen. So is Margaret Patterson, the neighbor who watched you stalk my mother every night for weeks. I stepped closer, close enough to see the broken blood vessels in his eyes. It's over, Detective Webb. 25 years later, but it's over. He stared at me for a long moment, and I saw something crack behind his eyes. Not guilt, I don't think Marcus Webb was capable of guilt, but understanding, the understanding that his carefully constructed life was about to collapse. Your mother, he said quietly, was a whore who got what she deserved. Torres grabbed my arm before I could move. Get him out of here, she ordered. They dragged him toward the waiting car, his bathrobe flapping in the cold morning air. Patricia Webb stood on the porch in her nightgown, watching her husband disappear into the back of a police cruiser, her face blank with shock. I stayed until the car pulled away, until the street fell quiet again, until the sun began to rise over the rooftops of this ordinary suburban neighborhood where a killer had hidden for 25 years. My mother was still dead. Nothing would change that. But finally, someone would pay. The observation room was small and cold, separated from the interrogation chamber by a one-way mirror. I sat between Eleanor and Detective Torres, watching the man who had murdered my mother adjust his handcuffs like they were a minor inconvenience. Marcus Webb had changed out of his bathrobe into an orange jumpsuit. He looked different now, composed, alert. The confusion of his early morning arrest replaced by the calm confidence of a man who had spent 32 years on the other side of this table. He's been questioned hundreds of times, Torres murmured. He knows every trick in the book. Then why are we here? Eleanor asked. Her voice was steady, but I could feel her trembling beside me. Because he's never faced this much evidence before. And he's never faced his victim's family watching. FBI agent Martinez entered the interrogation room, a thick folder under her arm. She was young, maybe 35, with sharp eyes and a reputation Torres had described as surgically precise. Mr. Webb, she began, settling into the chair across from him. "It's still detective," Webb said coolly. "Retired, not resigned." "Of course." Martinez opened her folder. "Let's talk about November 14th, 2000. Ancient history. The case was closed 25 years ago. Unsolved. Unsolved because you were the lead investigator." Martinez slid a photograph across the table. "Recognize this?" Webb glanced down. His expression didn't change, but I saw his fingers twitch. It was Margaret Patterson's photograph. Marcus standing outside my mother's apartment at 3:30 a.m., 2 weeks before her death. That could be anyone. Really? Another photograph. This one has your license plate clearly visible. October 11th, 2000. Another. October 19th. You're arguing with Catherine Bennett in her parking lot. Another. November 12th, 2 days before she died. You're watching. Her window. Webb's jaw tightened. I was conducting surveillance. Part of an investigation. What investigation? Silence. There's no record of any investigation involving Catherine Bennett, detective. I checked. Martinez leaned forward. 43 photographs. 6 weeks of documented stalking. Would you like to explain that? I don't have to explain anything to you. Martinez smiled. No, you don't. But you might want to explain it to a jury. She pulled out another document. This is your duty roster. From November 14th, 2000. You were logged in at the station from 6 p.m. to 2 a.m., but Officer James Riley signed you out at 9:47 p.m. for a wellness check. You didn't return until 11:52 p.m. Riley is dying of cancer and desperate to clear his conscience. He's already given a sworn statement. Martinez's voice hardened. 2 hours unaccounted for. Detective. The medical examiner placed Catherine Bennett's death between 9 and 11 p.m. Where were you? Webb stared at her. The mask was beginning to crack. I want a lawyer. That's your right. But before you make that call, there's something you should see. Martinez turned to the mirror. Send her in. The door opened, and Diana walked through. I hadn't seen her since that morning in Charlotte, when I'd left her crying in her kitchen. She looked older now, thinner, grayer, like the weight of her secrets had finally caught up with her. But her eyes were clear. And when she looked at Marcus Webb, there was no fear in them, only resolve. Hello, Marcus, she said quietly. Webb's composure shattered. What the hell is she doing here? Diana Webb, excuse me. Diana Holloway has agreed to testify against you in exchange for immunity on accessory charges. Martinez stood, gathering her folder. She's kept a journal for 25 years, Marcus. Every conversation, every threat, every detail of what you did to Catherine Bennett and her daughter. She's lying. She's mentally ill. I'm tired, Marcus. Diana's voice was soft but steady. I'm tired of being afraid of you. I'm tired of carrying your secrets. She turned to face him fully. I watched you destroy that girl's life. I helped you raise a stolen child, and I stayed silent because I was a coward. She looked toward the mirror toward me, though she couldn't see me. I can't undo what I did, but I can tell the truth now. Webb lunged across the table, but the chains caught him short. Guards rushed in, forcing him back into his chair. Through it all, Diana didn't flinch. This isn't over, Webb snarled. You think you've won? You don't know what I'm capable of. Diana turned and walked out without looking back. In the observation room, Eleanor reached for my hand. It's almost over, she whispered. I watched Marcus Webb thrash against his restraints, his careful mask finally destroyed, and I realized something. He wasn't afraid of prison. He was afraid of being seen. And now, finally, everyone could see exactly what he was. 3 days after the interrogation, Marcus Webb asked to speak with me. Torres advised against it. Eleanor begged me not to go. Even Diana, who had found unexpected courage in that interrogation room, warned me that Marcus was dangerous even in chains, but I needed to hear it from him. I needed to understand why. The interview room was different from the interrogation chamber, smaller, more intimate, with a single table bolted to the floor and 2 chairs facing each other. Webb sat in one of them. His wrists shackled to a metal ring, his orange jumpsuit wrinkled from 3 days in a holding cell. He looked tired. Old. Human. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. You came, he said as I sat down. I wasn't sure you would. I'm not here for you. I'm here for my mother. Something flickered across his face. Catherine, you really do look just like her. Same eyes, same stubborn chin. He laughed softly. She had that same look when she told me it was over, like she thought she could just walk away. Tell me what happened. Webb studied me for a long moment, as if weighing his options. Then he sighed, and the last of his defenses seemed to crumble. I met your mother in 1998. She was a waitress at a diner near the station. Beautiful, kind, lonely. His voice softened with something that might have been genuine emotion. I was married to Diana, but the marriage was dead. Catherine made me feel alive again. You had an affair. For almost 2 years. I was going to leave Diana, start over with Catherine. I had it all planned out. His jaw tightened. Then, she got pregnant. My breath caught. With me. With you. Webb's eyes met mine. I wanted her to get rid of it. She refused. Said she was keeping the baby, raising it alone if she had to. She didn't need me anymore. The words hung in the air like poison. I couldn't let that happen, he continued. I had a reputation, a career. If anyone found out I'd fathered a child with a waitress while my wife sat at home. He shook his head. I told Catherine to keep quiet. I'd send money, visit when I could. She agreed at first. But after you were born, she changed. Changed how? She wanted more. Wanted me to acknowledge you publicly. Wanted me to leave Diana and be a real father. His voice hardened. She started threatening to expose me. Said she'd go to my captain, my wife, the newspapers. She was going to destroy everything I'd built. I felt sick. So, you killed her. Webb was silent for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was flat, empty. I went to her apartment that night to talk, to make her see reason. But she wouldn't listen. She kept saying, you deserved to know your father, that she was done hiding, that she didn't care what it cost me. I just wanted her to stop talking. But she fought back, and I pushed her. She hit her head on the corner of the coffee table. And then she was dead. He said it like he was describing the weather. I panicked. I cleaned up what I could, made it look like a robbery. But then I heard you crying in the bedroom. My heart stopped. You were standing in your crib, calling for your mama, 3 years old, and you looked right at me with Catherine's eyes. His voice cracked. The first genuine emotion I'd heard. I couldn't leave you there. Couldn't let you go into the system, be raised by strangers. You were my daughter, so you took me. I took you home. Told Diana you were the child of a dead informant, that we were fostering you temporarily. She believed me for years. He laughed bitterly. Or maybe she didn't. Maybe she always knew and was too afraid to say anything. I sat with the weight of his words, feeling them settle into my bones. My father, the man who had killed my mother, was my biological father. Why are you telling me this? I finally asked. Webb leaned forward, chains rattling. Because I'm tired, Emma. Tired of hiding. Tired of pretending. He met my eyes. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know, I never meant to hurt her. I loved your mother. In my own broken way, I loved her. I stood up slowly, my chair scraping against the concrete floor. You didn't love her, I said quietly. You owned her. And when she tried to break free, you killed her. I walked to the door and knocked twice. The guard opened it immediately. Emma. Webb's voice stopped me. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. I looked back at him one last time. This broken, pathetic man who had shaped my entire existence with one act of violence. "My name is Emma Bennett," I said. "And your apology means nothing." I walked out and didn't look back. The Suffolk County Courthouse smelled like old wood and nervous sweat. I sat in the front row of the gallery, Eleanor on my left, Diana 3 rows behind us. We hadn't spoken since the interrogation room, but I could feel her eyes on the back of my head like a physical weight. September had arrived with a crispness that felt like nature holding its breath. Outside, protesters gathered on both sides, some demanding justice for Catherine Bennett, others defending the wrongly accused hero cop, 25 years. And Marcus Webb still had supporters who refused to believe the truth. The courtroom filled slowly. Reporters claimed the back rows, their notebooks ready. Sandra Chen sat near the aisle, her folder of letters clutched against her chest. Margaret Patterson had sent a video deposition from her nursing home at 98. The trip would have been too dangerous. Officer James Riley was absent too. He had died 3 weeks earlier, but his sworn statement would speak for him. All rise. Judge Helen Fitzgerald entered, a silver-haired woman in her 60s, with a reputation for fairness and an intolerance for theatrics. She surveyed the packed courtroom with sharp eyes before taking her seat. The People versus Marcus Andrew Webb. Case number 2025CR4471. She looked toward the prosecution table. "Miss Santos, your opening statement." District Attorney Carmen Santos rose. She was young for her position, barely 40, but she'd built her career on cold cases, on speaking for victims who had waited decades for their day in court. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," she began. 25 years ago, a young mother named Catherine Bennett was murdered in her apartment in Roxbury. She was 27 years old. She had a 3-year-old daughter named Emma. She had dreams, hopes, a future that was stolen from her. Santos walked slowly toward the jury box. The police investigated. They found no suspects. The case went cold. Catherine Bennett became a statistic. Another unsolved murder in a city with too many of them. She paused, letting the silence build. But Catherine's case wasn't unsolved because there were no leads. It was unsolved because the lead investigator, the man responsible for finding her killer, was the killer himself. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Judge Fitzgerald silenced it with a look. "The evidence will show that Marcus Webb had a 2-year affair with Catherine Bennett, that he fathered her child, that when Catherine threatened to expose their relationship, he went to her apartment on the night of November 14th, 2000, and he killed her." Santos turned to face Webb directly. He sat at the defense table in a gray suit, his expression carefully neutral. "The evidence will show that Marcus Webb then abducted 3-year-old Emma Bennett, his own biological daughter, and raised her under a false identity for 25 years. That he manipulated evidence, suppressed witness statements, and used his position as a police officer to ensure that no one would ever discover what he had done." She returned to the jury. "This is not a case of circumstantial evidence. We have photographs documenting weeks of stalking. We have letters in which Catherine described her fear. We have testimony from witnesses who tried to report Marcus Webb's behavior and were ignored. We have his own confession, recorded in a police interview room." Santos's voice hardened. Marcus Webb was sworn to protect and serve. Instead, he murdered the mother of his child, stole that child, and spent 25 years living as a respected member of his community, while Catherine Bennett's family grieved. She looked at me. Our eyes met. "Emma Bennett is here today. She survived. She discovered the truth, and she deserves justice." Santos sat down. The courtroom was silent. Judge Fitzgerald turned to the defense table. "Mr. Harrison, your opening statement." Defense attorney Robert Harrison rose, a tall man with silver temples and the easy confidence of someone who had won more cases than he'd lost. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said smoothly, "you've just heard a compelling story. But that's all it is, a story, built on circumstantial evidence, unreliable witnesses, and a confession obtained under duress from a man who spent 3 days in custody without proper legal representation." He buttoned his jacket. The defense will show that Marcus Webb is not a murderer. He is a decorated police officer who made mistakes in his personal life, mistakes he deeply regrets, but who has never harmed anyone. Harrison glanced at me with something like pity. Emma Bennett has been through a terrible ordeal. She deserves answers, but the answers she's been given are wrong, and convicting an innocent man will not bring her mother back. He sat down. Judge Fitzgerald checked her notes. Miss Santos, call your first witness. Santos stood. The people call Emma Bennett. The witness stand felt smaller than it looked from the gallery. I placed my hand on the Bible, swore to tell the truth, and sat down facing 12 strangers who would decide whether my mother's killer would finally pay. Miss Bennett, D.A. Santos began gently. Can you describe how you discovered the truth about your identity? I told them everything. The DNA test, the 0% match, the article about Catherine Bennett's murder, Eleanor's photographs, Diana's journal. Each word felt like pulling glass from my chest. But I kept going. And when you confronted Diana Holloway, the woman who raised you, what did she tell you? She told me that Marcus Webb killed my mother, that he brought me home that night and forced her to help raise me under a false identity, that she'd been afraid of him for 25 years. Santos introduced the evidence methodically. The photographs, the letters, the duty roster. Each piece built upon the last, until the weight of it seemed to press down on the entire courtroom. No further questions. Defense attorney Harrison rose slowly, buttoning his jacket with practiced ease. Miss Bennett, you've been through a great deal. I'm sorry for your loss. His voice dripped with manufactured sympathy. But I have to ask, before March of this year, you had no memory of Catherine Bennett, did you? I was 3 years old when she died. So everything you know about your biological mother comes from other people. People who might have their own agendas? Objection, Santos said. Speculation. Withdrawn. Harrison smiled. Let me ask this instead. Diana Holloway raised you for 25 years. She fed you, clothed you, sent you to college. Is that correct? And now she's testifying against her ex-husband in exchange for immunity. Isn't it possible she's simply trying to save herself? I met his eyes. Diana kept a journal for 25 years, documenting everything Marcus did. She started writing the night he brought me home. That's not the action of someone making up stories to save herself. Harrison's smile flickered. We'll let the jury decide that. The trial continued for 3 more days. Sandra Chen took the stand and read Catherine's letters aloud, her voice breaking on the words my mother had written 4 days before her death. Asterisk. I'm so scared. Sandra. I think he might actually hurt me. Asterisk. The jury watched Margaret Patterson's video deposition, a 98-year-old woman describing how she'd photographed Marcus Webb stalking Catherine for 6 weeks, how she'd tried to report it and been ignored. I knew something terrible was going to happen, Margaret said, her voice thin but steady. I knew, and no one would listen. Eleanor testified about the night Catherine died, how she'd received a call at 2 a.m. from the police, how she'd rushed to the apartment and found her daughter's body covered with a white sheet, how 3-year-old Emma was simply gone. They told me she probably wandered off, Eleanor said, tears streaming down her face. They told me to prepare for the worst. I spent 25 years thinking my granddaughter was dead. Diana was the final witness for the prosecution. She walked to the stand like a woman approaching her own execution, but her voice never wavered. Marcus came home that night around midnight, she testified. He was carrying Emma Olivia. He called her then. He told me she was the daughter of a dead informant, that we needed to foster her temporarily. When did you learn the truth? Santos asked. About a year later. I found newspaper clippings in his desk, articles about Catherine Bennett's murder. Diana's hands trembled. I confronted him. He told me everything, said if I ever told anyone, he would kill me too, and he would make sure Emma disappeared for real this time. Why didn't you go to the police? Diana looked at Webb for the first time since taking the stand. He stared back, expressionless. Because he was the police. Who was I supposed to tell? His partner? His captain? They all protected each other. She turned to the jury. I was a coward. I know that. I told myself I was protecting Emma, but I was really protecting myself. I've spent 25 years hating myself for it. Harrison's cross-examination was brutal. Mrs. Holloway, you've admitted to helping cover up a murder for 25 years. Why should this jury believe anything you say? Because I have nothing left to lose. Because I'm tired of lying. And because Emma deserves the truth. Or because you're facing accessory charges, and this is your only way out. Diana shook her head. I'm guilty. I know I'm guilty. But Marcus killed that girl's mother. I watched him destroy evidence. I heard him threaten witnesses. I'm not lying to save myself. I'm telling the truth because I should have told it 25 years ago. Harrison had no response to that. On the fourth day, the prosecution rested. I sat in the gallery as Santos delivered her closing argument, her voice rising with conviction. Catherine Bennett was 27 years old. She was a mother. She was a daughter. She was a woman who made the mistake of trusting the wrong man, and she paid for that mistake with her life. Santos pointed at Webb. This man murdered her. This man stole her child. This man spent 25 years walking free while Catherine's family suffered. The evidence is overwhelming. The witnesses are credible, and justice, however delayed, demands a verdict of guilty. Tomorrow, the defense would make their closing argument, and then it would be up to the jury. Bạn hoàn toàn đúng. Tôi xin lỗi vì sự nhầm lẫn. Tôi đã bỏ qua việc viết nội dung đầy đủ của Task 20 và nhảy thẳng sang Task 21 để tôi viết lại. Task 20. The defense. Đầy đủ ngay bây giờ. Robert Harrison stood before the jury like a man who had already won. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, his voice warm and reasonable. You've heard 4 days of emotional testimony. You've seen photographs and letters, and watched a 98-year-old woman describe events from a quarter century ago. It's been moving. He paused, letting his words settle. But emotion is not evidence. Sympathy is not proof. And the burden of proof in this courtroom lies with the prosecution beyond a reasonable doubt. Harrison walked slowly along the jury box, making eye contact with each juror. Let's examine what the prosecution has actually proven. They've proven that Marcus Webb had an affair with Catherine Bennett. My client has never denied this. It was a mistake, a moral failing, and he has lived with that shame for 25 years. He stopped in front of juror number 7, a middle-aged man with kind eyes. They've proven that Marcus Webb fathered Emma Bennett. Again, my client acknowledges this. He made a child with a woman who was not his wife. It's not something he's proud of. Harrison turned back toward the courtroom. But having an affair is not murder. Fathering a child is not kidnapping. The prosecution wants you to make a leap from moral failure to capital crime based on circumstantial evidence and the testimony of witnesses who have every reason to lie. He approached the evidence table, picking up one of Margaret Patterson's photographs. These photographs show Marcus Webb near Catherine Bennett's apartment. The prosecution calls it stalking. But Marcus Webb was a police officer. He conducted surveillance as part of his job, and more importantly, Harrison held up the photo. Being near someone's apartment is not proof of murder. He set the photograph down and picked up Diana's journal. This journal was written by a woman who, by her own admission, helped cover up a crime for 25 years. A woman who is now testifying in exchange for immunity. A woman who has every reason to blame her ex-husband for her own failures. Harrison's voice hardened. Diana Holloway isn't a hero finally telling the truth. She's a co-conspirator, trying to save herself by sacrificing someone else. I watched the jury's faces, trying to read their reactions. Some looked thoughtful. Others looked troubled. Juror number 3, a young woman with glasses, was taking rapid notes. Harrison continued, methodically attacking each piece of evidence. The duty roster had gaps, yes, but gaps weren't proof of murder. Officer Riley's statement was hearsay from a dead man who couldn't be cross-examined. The letters showed Catherine was afraid. But fear wasn't proof that Marcus had done anything wrong. People are afraid of many things, Harrison said. Sometimes their fears are justified. Sometimes they're not. Catherine Bennett's fear, however genuine, does not prove that Marcus Webb killed her. Then Harrison did something unexpected. The defense calls Marcus Webb to the stand. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Santos looked surprised. Even Judge Fitzgerald raised an eyebrow. Webb walked to the witness stand with the careful dignity of a man who had spent his life projecting authority. He placed his hand on the Bible, swore to tell the truth, and sat down. "Mr. Webb," Harrison began. "No." Webb's voice was steady. "I did not." "Did you kidnap Emma Bennett?" "No." "I rescued her." The word hung in the air. "Can you explain what you mean by that?" Webb turned to face the jury directly. "The night Catherine died, I received a call from a confidential informant. He told me there had been a disturbance at Catherine's apartment. I went to check on her off-duty. Yes, because I cared about her." His voice cracked slightly, perfectly calibrated emotion. "When I arrived, Catherine was already dead. There was blood everywhere. And Emma, my daughter, was alone in her crib, crying." Webb wiped his eyes. "I panicked. I should have called it in. I know that now. But all I could think about was Emma. If I reported what I'd found, she would go into the system. Foster care, group homes. I couldn't let that happen to my own child. So you took her home." "I took her home. I gave her a life, a family, safety." Webb looked at me, and for a moment, I almost believed him. "I made mistakes. I've made terrible mistakes, but I did not kill Catherine Bennett, and everything I did afterward, I did to protect Emma." Santos rose for cross-examination, her expression razor-sharp. "Mr. Webb, you claim you received a call from a confidential informant the night of the murder. What was this informant's name?" "I can't disclose that." "Informant protection. Convenient. And this informant, can anyone corroborate that this call happened?" "Phone records from 2000 would be destroyed." "Yes, we know." Santos stepped closer. "So we're supposed to take your word for it? The word of a man who admits he removed a child from a crime scene and never reported finding a dead body?" "I was trying to protect my daughter." "Your daughter." Santos let the words hang. "The same daughter whose mother you had been stalking for 6 weeks? The same daughter whose mother wrote letters saying she was terrified of you?" Catherine was emotional. She exaggerated things. She exaggerated your presence outside her apartment at 3:30 inches the morning. Santos held up Margaret Patterson's photograph. She exaggerated you arguing with her in the parking lot. She exaggerated telling her best friend 4 days before she died that she thought you might hurt her. Webb's composure flickered. "I never threatened her." "You never threatened her. You just showed up uninvited, followed her, watched her. And then, on the night she died, you happened to arrive at her apartment and find her already dead. That's what happened. That's what happened." Santos turned to the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen, the defendant wants you to believe an extraordinary coincidence. He wants you to believe that on the very night Catherine Bennett was murdered, a woman he had been stalking for weeks, a woman who was terrified of him, he just happened to receive a mysterious phone call. He just happened to arrive at her apartment. He just happened to find her dead." She faced Webb again. "And then, instead of calling police like any innocent person would do, I was protecting Emma." "You were protecting yourself." Santos's voice rose. "You killed Catherine Bennett because she was going to expose your affair. You took Emma because you couldn't leave a witness. And you spent 25 years hiding behind your badge while Catherine's family suffered." Objection. Harrison was on his feet. Argumentative. Sustained. Judge Fitzgerald turned to Santos. "Counselor, save it for closing arguments." Santos nodded, her point already made. No further questions. The courtroom buzzed with whispered conversations as Webb returned to his seat. His hands were shaking slightly, the first crack I'd seen in his armor since the trial began. Harrison approached the bench. "Your Honor, the defense rests." Judge Fitzgerald checked the clock. We'll adjourn until tomorrow morning for closing arguments. Court is dismissed. I walked out into the hallway, my mind spinning. Webb's testimony had been polished, emotional, almost believable. But Santos had exposed the holes, the convenient informant, the impossible coincidence, the decision to take Emma instead of calling for help. Eleanor found me near the windows, staring at nothing. He's good, I said quietly. Webb. He's a good liar. He's had 25 years of practice. Eleanor put her arm around me. But the truth is better than lies, Emma. It always wins eventually. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that tomorrow, the jury would see through Webb's performance and deliver the justice my mother deserved. But I had learned something about truth in the past 6 months. It didn't always win. Sometimes it arrived too late. Sometimes it wasn't enough. Tomorrow, I would find out which kind of truth this was. October 15th arrived, wrapped in gray clouds and the smell of coming rain. I had spent the 3 weeks since the verdict in a strange kind of limbo, staying at Eleanor's house in Camden, learning the rhythms of a grandmother I'd never known, trying to reconcile 28 years of memories with a truth that made them all feel like lies. The drive to Boston took 4 hours. Eleanor insisted on coming, though the trip exhausted her. At 78, she moved more slowly now, her joints stiff from decades of grief held too long in her body. I need to see this, she said when I suggested she stay home. I need to watch him, hear the words. For Catherine. The courtroom was quieter than it had been during the trial. No reporters jostling for seats, no cameras waiting outside. Just the families of the victims, Eleanor and me on one side, Patricia Webb and her 2 teenage children on the other. I hadn't thought about Webb's other family. The wife who had married a murderer without knowing it. The children who had grown up calling him Dad, who had cheered at his retirement party, who now sat in a courtroom watching their father be sentenced for crimes committed before they were born. The younger one, a girl, maybe 16, was crying silently. Her mother held her hand, but stared straight ahead, her face carved from stone. Marcus Webb entered in an orange jumpsuit and shackles. He looked smaller than I remembered. Older. The 3 weeks in county jail had stripped away whatever dignity he'd managed to maintain during the trial. He didn't look at me. Didn't look at anyone. Just shuffled to his seat and waited. Judge Fitzgerald began with the victim impact statements. Eleanor went first. She walked to the podium with her cane, adjusted the microphone, and unfolded a piece of paper with trembling hands. My daughter Catherine was 27 years old when she died, Eleanor began. She was smart and kind and stubborn in the way that good people are stubborn, unwilling to accept injustice, unwilling to stay silent when silence was easier. Her voice cracked. But she continued. Marcus Webb took her from me. He took her life. He took her daughter. He took 25 years that I will never get back. Years of watching Emma grow up. Years of birthday parties and graduations and ordinary Tuesday afternoons. Eleanor looked directly at Webb. You told yourself you were protecting Emma. You told yourself you loved Catherine. But love doesn't kill. Love doesn't steal. Love doesn't spend 25 years lying while a mother's grave goes unvisited and a grandmother's arms stay empty. She folded her paper. I don't forgive you. I will never forgive you. But I hope, in whatever years you have left, you find the courage to face what you really are. Not a protector, not a father, just a coward who destroyed a family because he was too weak to face the consequences of his own choices. Eleanor returned to her seat. I helped her sit down, her whole body shaking. Miss Bennett, Judge Fitzgerald said, do you wish to make a statement? I hadn't prepared anything. Hadn't known what to say. But I stood anyway, walked to the podium, and faced the man who had given me life and stolen my mother's. I used to wonder why I felt like I didn't belong, I said slowly. Growing up, there was always something, a feeling I couldn't name, a sense that something fundamental was missing. I thought it was just me. Just some flaw in my personality. I looked at Webb. Now I know it wasn't a flaw. It was the truth, trying to break through 25 years of lies. My voice steadied. You killed my mother. You stole me from my grandmother. You raised me on a foundation of deception so complete that I didn't even know my own name. And for what? To protect your reputation? To avoid the consequences of an affair? Webb finally looked up. His eyes were empty. You could have walked away. After Catherine died, if you really found her like you claimed, you could have called the police. You could have let me go to Eleanor, to a grandmother who would have loved me, who spent 25 years grieving a granddaughter she thought was dead. I felt tears on my cheeks but didn't wipe them away. Instead, you chose yourself. Every single day for 25 years, you chose yourself over the truth, over justice, over me. I stepped back from the podium. I hope your sentence gives you time to think about that. I hope you spend every day of however many years you have left remembering what you took from us, because we will never stop remembering what we lost. Judge Fitzgerald addressed Webb directly. Mr. Webb, you have been found guilty of murder in the first degree, kidnapping in the first degree, obstruction of justice, evidence tampering, and perjury. Before I pronounce sentence, do you wish to make a statement? Webb stood slowly. His attorney whispered something, but Webb shook his head. Your Honor, he said, his voice hoarse. I know nothing I say will change what happens today, but I want Emma to know. He turned to me. I did love you, in my own way. Everything I did after that night, I did, because I couldn't bear to lose you. You didn't love me, I said, before I could stop myself. You owned me, just like you owned my mother. The courtroom fell silent. Judge Fitzgerald cleared her throat. Marcus Andrew Webb, you have committed crimes of extraordinary cruelty and calculation. You murdered a young mother. You stole her child. You corrupted the justice system you swore to uphold. And you maintained this deception for a quarter of a century while your victim's family suffered. She paused. For the crime of murder in the first degree, I sentence you to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. For kidnapping in the first degree, I sentence you to 25 years, to run consecutively. For obstruction of justice, 15 years, consecutive. For evidence tampering, 10 years, consecutive. For perjury, 5 years, consecutive. The numbers echoed in the silent courtroom. The total sentence is life plus 55 years. You will die in prison, Mr. Webb. And that is exactly what justice demands. The gavel fell. Webb stood motionless as the guards approached. His wife let out a small sound, not quite a sob, not quite a gasp. His daughter buried her face in her hands. As they led him away, Webb looked back at me one final time. I'm sorry, he said. I said nothing. The door closed behind him, and Marcus Andrew Webb was gone from my life forever. The weeks after sentencing passed in a blur of logistics and emotions I couldn't name. I stayed in Camden with Eleanor, sleeping in the room that had once been Catherine's. The walls were covered with photographs, my mother as a child, a teenager, a young woman with her whole life ahead of her. I studied her face each night before falling asleep, searching for myself in the curve of her smile, the shape of her eyes. You have her hands, Eleanor told me one morning over breakfast. Long fingers. She used to play piano, you know. Not well, but with such passion. I looked down at my hands. The hands I'd thought belonged to Olivia Morgan. The hands that had apparently belonged to Catherine Bennett, all along. I don't play piano, I said. Maybe you could learn. Eleanor smiled. It's never too late to discover the parts of yourself you haven't met yet. The media attention faded gradually. Then all at once, for 2 weeks, my face had been everywhere. The stolen daughter, the woman who solved her own mother's murder, the living proof that cold cases could be cracked. Journalists called Eleanor's house at all hours. A producer from a true crime podcast offered me $50,000 for an exclusive interview. I declined everything. The story isn't entertainment, I told Detective Torres when she asked why I wasn't capitalizing on the attention. It's my life. My mother's death. I won't let it become content. Torres nodded, something like respect in her eyes. For what it's worth, I think Catherine would have felt the same way. The case continued to ripple outward in ways I hadn't anticipated. 3 other cold cases in Massachusetts were reopened, based on patterns Torres had identified in Webb's behavior. 2 retired officers came forward with stories of evidence they'd seen disappear. Witnesses who'd been discouraged from testifying. He wasn't the only one, Torres told me. The system protected him, because the system protects its own. But now that he's fallen, others are starting to talk. I didn't know how to feel about that. Proud, maybe. Angry, definitely. Exhausted beyond words. Diana called twice. I didn't answer. The 3rd time, she left a voicemail. Emma, I know you don't want to talk to me. I understand. But I wanted you to know I'm selling the house in Charlotte. Moving somewhere smaller, quieter, somewhere I can start over. If starting over is even possible for someone like me. A pause. The sound of breathing. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it. But I hope someday you'll understand that I did love you. In my broken, cowardly way, I did love you. Everything I did wrong, I did, because I was afraid of losing you. Another pause. Goodbye, Emma. I hope you find peace. I hope you find yourself. And I hope if you ever think of me, you'll remember that I tried. In the end, I tried to make it right. The voicemail ended. I sat with my phone in my hand for a long time, staring at Diana's name on the screen. The woman who had raised me. The woman who had lied to me every day for 25 years. The woman who had finally told the truth when it mattered most. I didn't know if I would ever forgive her. I didn't know if I wanted to, but I saved the voicemail instead of deleting it. Sandra Chen invited me to dinner at her apartment in Dorchester. We sat at her kitchen table eating homemade dumplings, while she told me stories about my mother. Real stories. The kind that Diana had never been able to tell. Catherine used to burn everything she cooked. Sandra laughed. Once she set off the smoke alarm making toast. Toast! But she never gave up. She'd just open all the windows and try again. I laughed too, and the sound surprised me. I hadn't laughed in months. She would have been so proud of you, Sandra said, her smile softening. The way you fought for her. The way you refused to let the truth stay buried. I didn't do it alone, I said. You helped. Margaret. Eleanor. Even Diana. In the end, that's how justice works. Sandra refilled my tea. One person starts asking questions, and others find the courage to answer. Catherine asked the first question 25 years ago, when she refused to stay silent about Marcus. She couldn't finish it. But you did. I thought about that, the idea of justice as a relay race, a baton passed from hand to hand across decades. Do you think she knew? I asked. That night. Do you think she knew what was going to happen? Sandra was quiet for a moment. I think she knew something was wrong. I think she was scared. But I also think she believed, really believed, that truth would protect her. Sandra's eyes glistened. She was wrong about that. Truth didn't protect her, but it remembered her. And in the end, it set you free. On the drive back to Camden, I pulled over at a rest stop and sat in my car, watching the sun set over the Massachusetts hills. I thought about the life I'd left behind. The apartment in Charlotte, the job at the design firm, the friends who had known Olivia Morgan, who were now trying to figure out how to know Emma Bennett. I thought about the life ahead, the questions I still needed to answer, the relationships I still needed to define, the person I was still becoming. The truth had set me free. But freedom, I was learning, was just another word for the terrifying privilege of choosing who you wanted to be. I started the car and drove toward Eleanor's house, toward home. Diana's address wasn't hard to find. She had moved to a small coastal town in Rhode Island, westerly, population 12,000, the kind of place where people went to disappear quietly. I found her rental listing online, a modest cottage 3 blocks from the beach. I didn't tell Eleanor where I was going. Didn't tell Sandra or Torres or anyone else who might try to talk me out of it. I just got in my car on a Tuesday morning in late November and drove south. The cottage was painted pale blue with white trim, a small garden out front where someone had planted winter pansies. It looked peaceful, normal, nothing like the house in Charlotte where I'd grown up believing a lie. I sat in my car for 20 minutes, watching the curtains flutter in the window. Part of me wanted to drive away. Part of me needed to see this through. I knocked. Diana opened the door, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. She looked older than she had at the trial. Thinner, grayer. The lines around her eyes deeper than I remembered. But her eyes themselves were clear, sober, present in a way they hadn't been for years. "Emma," she breathed. "I didn't think you'd come. Neither did I." She made tea. Not the herbal blends Marcus had used to control her anxiety, but simple black tea with honey. We sat at her small kitchen table, the November light slanting through windows that looked out over a garden going dormant for winter. "I got your voicemail," I said finally. "I saved it." Diana's hands tightened around her cup. "I meant every word. I know." I took a breath. "That's why I'm here." The silence stretched between us, filled with 28 years of breakfasts and bedtimes and birthday cakes, filled with lies and love and the impossible tangle of both. "I have questions," I said. "Things I need to understand before I can figure out how to feel about you." Diana nodded. "Ask me anything. Did you know? That first night, when he brought me home, did you know I wasn't an informant's child?" "Not at first." Diana's voice was steady, but I could see the effort it cost her. "I believed him for almost a year. Then I found the newspaper clippings in his desk, articles about Catherine Bennett's murder, about a missing 3-year-old named Emma, and you stayed anyway." I stayed anyway. She met my eyes. "I've spent months in therapy trying to understand why. Fear, mostly. Marcus was. You never knew him the way I did. The real him, the one behind closed doors. He hurt you? Not physically, not often. But there are other kinds of hurt." Diana set down her cup. "He controlled everything. The money, the car, who I could see, where I could go. When I found those clippings, I confronted him. He told me if I ever said a word, he would kill you. He would make it look like an accident, and I would spend the rest of my life knowing it was my fault." I felt sick. "So, you stayed silent to protect me." That's what I told myself. For 25 years, that's what I told myself. Diana's voice cracked. "But the truth is more complicated. I was also afraid for myself. Afraid of what would happen if I tried to leave. Afraid of being alone. Afraid of facing what I'd become." She looked at me with tears streaming down her face. "I loved you, Emma. From the moment he brought you through that door, I loved you. But I was also a coward. I was complicit, and no amount of love makes up for that." I didn't know what to say. For months, I had rehearsed this moment in my head. The accusations I would make, the anger I would unleash, the righteous fury of a daughter betrayed. But sitting across from this broken woman in her pale blue cottage, I couldn't find the rage I'd expected. "You testified against him," I said finally. "In the end, you told the truth. Too late. 25 years. Too late. But you told it." I leaned forward. Sandra Chen kept Catherine's letters for 25 years, waiting for someone to listen. Margaret Patterson kept her photographs. Eleanor kept hoping. "And you kept your journal." Diana looked up, confused. "Everyone was waiting," I continued. "Everyone was afraid. But when the moment came, you all stepped forward. You didn't have to testify. Harrison would have torn you apart, and you knew it. But you sat on that stand and told the truth anyway. It was the least I could do." "No." I shook my head. "It was the most you could do. And it mattered." We talked for hours. Diana told me stories I'd never heard about the early years of my childhood, the nightmares I used to have, the way I would sometimes ask for my other mommy in my sleep. "You remembered her," Diana said. Not consciously, but somewhere deep down. I think that's why you never quite trusted me completely. Some part of you knew. I thought about all the times I'd felt that strange distance, that sense of something not quite right. I'd blamed myself for years. Now I understood it was my own survival instinct, trying to tell me the truth. I don't know if I can forgive you, I said as the sun began to set. Not yet, maybe not ever, but I can try to understand, and I can acknowledge that you tried, in the end, to make it right. Diana wept. Silently, without drama, just tears falling down her face like rain. That's more than I deserve. Probably. I stood up. But it's what I can offer. For now. At the door, Diana caught my hand. Will you come back? Someday, I thought about Eleanor, waiting in Camden. About Catherine's grave, which I still hadn't visited. About the life I was building, from the ruins of the one I'd lost. I don't know, I said honestly. But I won't disappear. You'll know where I am. And if I ever figure out what forgiveness looks like, you'll be the first to know. Diana nodded. Fresh tears spilling over. Thank you, Emma. For coming. For listening. For giving me a chance to explain. I walked to my car, the November wind biting at my cheeks. Behind me, Diana stood in her doorway, watching me go. I didn't wave. But I didn't look away either. Some wounds heal slowly. Some never heal at all. But acknowledgement, the simple act of seeing someone's pain and allowing them to see yours, was a beginning. And beginnings, I was learning, were enough. Number. Asterisk. Task 25. The grave. Asterisk. I had been putting this off for months. Eleanor had offered to come with me a dozen times. Sandra had offered twice. Even Detective Torres, in her gruff way, had mentioned that she could arrange an escort if I wanted privacy from any lingering media attention. But this was something I needed to do alone. Cedar Grove Cemetery sat on a hill overlooking Boston Harbor. The kind of place where old money buried its dead beneath elaborate marble monuments. Catherine Bennett's grave was in a quieter section near the back. A simple headstone paid for by Eleanor, who had spent 25 years visiting a daughter she thought had died alone. December had arrived with the first real cold of winter. I pulled my coat tighter as I walked between the rows of graves, my breath forming small clouds in the morning air. The grass was brown and brittle beneath my feet. I found her easily. Eleanor had given me directions, drawn a small map on a napkin over breakfast. 3rd row from the oak tree, 4th stone from the path. I stood there for a long time, staring at the words carved in granite. My mother had been 27 years old, younger than I was now. She had lived her entire adult life in less time than I had spent believing a lie about who I was. Hi, Mom, I said finally. The words felt strange in my mouth. I had never called anyone Mom before. Not really. Diana had always been Diana, even when I thought she was my mother. I don't know what to say. I've imagined this moment so many times, but now that I'm here, I laughed softly, the sound catching in my throat. I guess I'm not very good at this. The wind picked up, rustling the dead leaves scattered across nearby graves. Somewhere in the distance, a crow called out, its harsh voice echoing across the cemetery. I found out the truth, I continued. About you. About what happened. About him. I couldn't bring myself to say Marcus's name here. Not in this place. He's in prison now. Life plus 55 years. He'll never hurt anyone again. I knelt down, brushing dried leaves from the base of the headstone. Eleanor told me about you. Sandra, too. They said you were stubborn and passionate and terrible at cooking. I smiled through the tears that had started falling. They said you loved me more than anything, that you would have done anything to protect me. My voice broke. You did protect me. Even at the end, you fought back. You didn't let him take me without a fight. I pressed my palm against the cold granite. I'm so sorry it took me 25 years to find you. I'm so sorry you've been here alone all this time. I don't know how long I stayed there. Long enough for my knees to ache from kneeling on the frozen ground. Long enough for the sun to climb higher in the pale winter sky. Long enough to say all the things I'd been carrying for months, the anger, the grief, the gratitude, the love. I told her about Eleanor, about how we were learning to be grandmother and granddaughter after a quarter-century apart. I told her about Sandra, who had kept her letters like sacred relics. I told her about Diana, and how I was trying to find a way to hold both the love and the betrayal in the same heart. I told her about myself, about Olivia Morgan, the graphic designer from Charlotte who had never quite fit into her own life, about Emma Bennett, the woman I was becoming, still rough around the edges, still uncertain of her shape. I don't know who I'm supposed to be, I admitted. Some days I feel like I'm finally becoming myself. Other days I feel like I'm just pretending to be someone I read about in a newspaper article. I traced the letters of her name with my finger. But I know one thing. I know I'm your daughter. Whatever else I am or become, I will always be your daughter. And I will spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of the sacrifice you made. Eleanor was waiting when I got back to Camden. She didn't ask how it went. Didn't press for details or demand emotional debriefs. She just opened her arms, and I walked into them. And we stood there in her kitchen, holding each other, while the December light faded outside. Did you find what you were looking for? She asked finally. I thought about the grave, the cold granite, the words carved in stone, the mother I had never known and would never stop missing. I don't know, I said honestly, but I found something. A beginning, maybe. A place to start. Eleanor pulled back, studying my face with Catherine's eyes, the same eyes I saw every time I looked in the mirror. That's all any of us can hope for, she said. A place to start. She made hot chocolate. The way she said Catherine used to like it, extra marshmallows, a dash of cinnamon. We sat together at the kitchen table as the first snowflakes of winter began to fall outside, dusting the garden with white. Tell me another story about her, I said. Something I haven't heard before. Eleanor smiled, her eyes distant with memory. Did I ever tell you about the time she tried to adopt a stray dog, and it turned out to be a coyote? I laughed, really laughed, the sound surprising us both. No. Tell me everything. And she did. Spring arrived in Camden like a promise kept. The snow melted slowly through February and March, revealing crocuses Eleanor had planted decades ago, purple and yellow and white, pushing up through the cold earth like small acts of faith. I watched them from the kitchen window each morning, marveling at how something so delicate could survive a Maine winter. I had been living with Eleanor for 6 months now. What started as a temporary arrangement had become something more permanent, more real. We had settled into a rhythm breakfast together, long walks along the harbor, evenings spent reading or talking, or simply sitting in comfortable silence. I was learning to be a granddaughter. She was learning to be a grandmother again. Neither of us was very good at it yet, but we were trying. Emma, Eleanor called from the living room. Come, look at this. I found her standing by the window, pointing at something in the garden. A small bird, a robin. The first of the season was hopping through the crocuses, its orange breast bright against the purple petals. Catherine loved robins, Eleanor said softly. She used to say they were proof that spring always comes, no matter how long the winter. I stood beside her, watching the robin hunt for worms in the softening earth. Do you think she'd recognize me? I asked. If she could see me now? Eleanor took my hand. I think she'd see exactly what I see. A woman who survived the unsurvivable. A woman who fought for truth when lies would have been easier. A woman who is still becoming who she's meant to be. She squeezed my fingers. Catherine would have been so proud, Emma. Just as I am. I had started working again. Not at a design firm that life belonged to Olivia Morgan, and I wasn't her anymore. Instead, I was volunteering with a victim advocacy organization in Portland, helping other people navigate the aftermath of crimes that had shattered their worlds. Detective Torres had made the introduction. "You've got a perspective most advocates don't have," she'd said. "The perspective of someone who lived it. That matters." She was right. When I sat with survivors, women whose husbands had betrayed them, children whose parents had lied to them, families torn apart by secrets too heavy to carry, I understood their pain in a way that couldn't be learned from textbooks. "How did you get through it?" A young woman named Maria asked me one afternoon. Her father had embezzled her college fund, disappeared, left her mother bankrupt and broken. "One day at a time," I told her. "Some days, 1 hour at a time." And I stopped waiting to feel better. I just started building something new. But doesn't it hurt? Knowing your whole life was a lie? I thought about the question carefully before answering. It hurts. It will probably always hurt. But here's what I've learned. The lie wasn't my whole life. The lie was something that happened to me. My life is what I do next. Maria nodded slowly, and I saw something shift in her eyes. Not hope, exactly, but the possibility of hope. And sometimes, that was enough to start. On my 29th birthday, Eleanor threw a small party. Sandra came up from Boston with a cake she'd made herself, chocolate with raspberry filling. Slightly lopsided but perfect in its imperfection. Detective Torres sent flowers and a card that said simply, "Diana sent a letter." I read it alone in my room that night, her careful handwriting filling 3 pages with apologies and memories and tentative hopes for the future. Asterisk, "I know I can't undo what I did, but I want you to know that the years I spent raising you, however tainted by lies, were the best years of my life. You taught me how to love, even when I was too broken to do it right." Asterisk. I didn't write back. Not yet. But I folded the letter carefully and placed it in the drawer beside Catherine's photographs. Someday, maybe. Someday. After the party, I walked alone to the harbor. The sun was setting over the water, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and gold. Fishing boats bobbed gently at their moorings. Somewhere nearby, a child laughed. I thought about the woman I had been a year ago. Olivia Morgan, graphic designer, living a comfortable life in Charlotte, never suspecting that everything she knew was built on sand. That woman felt like a stranger, now a character in a story I'd read once and half forgotten. I thought about the woman I was becoming. Emma Bennett, survivor, advocate, granddaughter. A woman still rough around the edges, still uncertain of her shape, but growing more solid every day. I thought about my mother, 27 years old, brave and stubborn, and terrible at cooking. Dead for 25 years, but alive in every story Eleanor told. Every photograph Sandra had saved. Every choice I made to honor her memory. The truth had set me free. Not the comfortable freedom of ignorance, but the harder freedom of knowing. Knowing who I was, where I came from, what had been done to me and what I had survived. I pulled out my phone and opened a new note. For months, I had been thinking about writing it all down. Not for publication, not for attention, just to have a record, a testament, proof that this had happened, and that I had made it through. I typed the first line, asterisk. My name is Emma Bennett, and for 25 years, I didn't exist. Asterisk. The cursor blinked, waiting for what came next. I smiled, slipped the phone back into my pocket, and watched the sun disappear beneath the horizon. There would be time for writing tomorrow. Tonight, I just wanted to breathe. The harbor lights flickered on one by one, and I turned to walk home. Home. It was still a new word. Still strange on my tongue, but it was mine now, and I was learning to speak it, one day at a time.